Chapter 221 arrive at G9 branch. All the dust settled, the flying squirrel ordered everyone to repair in place, and set off for the return flight the next day. At the same time, Mukuro, the widow of the deceased brothers, also needs to be restrained, which cannot be rushed. On the coast, Loya sat quietly by the bonfire, watching the soldiers in front of them busy but silent. At this moment, everyone's heart is a little heavy. Of the 359 people brought with them when they set off, only more than 200 were able to return alive. Loya didn't ask for the specific number, he was afraid that he would feel even more sad after reading it. People are like this, they can't see the people close to them leave, but they can turn a blind eye to the life and death of strangers. Loya knows that he is not a saint. Before he obtained this power, he was just an ordinary douchebag. There are countless people like him in any world. Ordinary people will have ideas, he also has. He also has the emotions that ordinary people should have. Therefore, he never deliberately asked himself to be happy, and he should be happy and sad. He could massacre the pirates in Heathville and Crisvia, but he still couldn't be calm in the face of the death of his colleagues. The only thing he can do now is to enchant those body bags and freeze the bodies so that they can return to their hometowns and bury them in the ground. But this is already a luxury that many naval soldiers can't even imagine. One Piece world has vast seas and inconvenient transportation. Most of the time, soldiers who died in battle can only be buried or incinerated in place. Although dying in battle is a kind of honor, it is also a kind of sadness not to be able to return to the hometown. Compared with him, the flying squirrel, as a veteran, is much calmer. His love for the soldiers is obvious to all, and he is undoubtedly the most distressed of all the soldiers who have died. But he is a veteran lieutenant after all. Although these pictures are shocking, he can control his emotions with strong willpower and arrange various aftermaths in an orderly manner. He told Loya to get used to it. But is it so easy to get used to? After a night of silence, the time came to the next morning. The wind in Spring Island is always so indifferent and warm, even if such a tragedy happened on the island, these winds are still unhurried and gently blowing by everyone. Woo-hoo. The sound of the air whistle of the warship startled a group of birds, making them flutter their wings and fly into the sky in a panic. Led by the warship that the flying squirrel was on, a series of 5 warships lined up in large characters and slowly left the coastal port. The wind was a bit strong today, and it was a tailwind from the direction of the island, which seemed to be sending them off. After waiting for the warship to leave, Loya took the tentacles of the ocean-going shrimp, looked back at Ian Island for the last time, then turned over the shrimp and followed the warship. The destination of their voyage was not to return to Marineford, but to the G9 branch in the Windless Belt. There, in addition to allowing Lieutenant Colonel Dato and others to rest assured, it was also for replenishing supplies. After all, it is the Navy, with so many branches, it is the biggest waste not to use it, so this is a plan that has been made long ago. Ian Island was located on the edge of the Windless Belt, just 3 days sailing from the Navy's G9 branch. The frontier station of the G9 branch, that is, the isolated island where Alex left behind, is only a day's voyage. If you go at full speed, you can reach it in half a day at most. But now, there is no need to rush on the road so fast. After experiencing repeated shocks, no matter how strong the Iron Man is, he needs to rest. It is also Simon and others who are more spiritual, because they are playing Chan Oil all the time, and they are the least affected. So along the way, Simon entangled Alex and asked him for sniper skills. Yes, this Major General Alex, who is deeply trusted by the flying squirrel, is still mainly fighting in one-handed sniper skills. The sensible Simon knew that it was impossible for him to be on a par with any of his companions in the elite camp. His only advantage was in his ability to achieve fruit. Becoming a sniper is his only and best direction. Arudo and Mind are learning from each other, and of course from the uninformed point of view, this is a unilateral beating by Mind. Every time the black and thorny wolf Kiba stick struck Arudo, there would be a dull sound like a chiming bell. This was their only accompaniment, except for the sound of the sea breeze and the waves being carried by the sailing of warships. A few days later, the warship docked at the port of the G9 branch without incident. The highest officer of the G9 branch is the young and promising Lieutenant General Hablo. From the perspective of naval history, those who can take the position of lieutenant general in their 30s are enough to be called young and promising. This dazzling bald lieutenant general is covered in scars all over his body, as if he was thrown into a fishing net and strangled. But his smile was so sunny, and the scar on his face not only didn't make him look disgusting, but it was a little funny and very relaxing. When the two sides met, Lieutenant General Hablo took a deep breath and saluted the Flying Squirrel and Loya seriously. Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel, Lieutenant General Loya, welcome to the G9 branch. Supplies are ready and can be carried on board at any time. Well, thank you very much. The flying skier solemnly bowed back to Hablo. But although the supplies are ready, they still need to stay in the G9 branch for a day. Because there will be a storm on the edge of the calm belt tonight, if you don't want to take a detour, it's best to wait for the storm to pass. It was night, and Loya was led by the soldiers to his hut. Not exactly luxurious, but neat and clean. Saying goodbye to the soldiers, Loya took out the backpack he took off from Pippi Shrimp, pulled out a phone bug, and dialed it. Beep, beep, Bilo. The phone bug's eyes suddenly widened, and a familiar face was quickly simulated by it. After carefully observing the surrounding situation with the enemy of living creatures and seeing and hearing, Loya leaned on the thin wooden bed and said, as the matter completed. Jones. On the way to the G9 branch, Jones called Loya once, but because Jones himself committed a death at the time, the call had to be interrupted. Ah, of course it's been completed. Do you want to hear the detailed process? The voice from the phone bug was a little tired, and it seemed that half a day was not enough time for Jones to recover. The island turtle is bigger than the general large-scale sea king. Jones' beast language fruit, even pervert, must also abide by the basic law. No, the law of conservation of energy. To be honest, Jones did not die because of the wrong opening method, which was beyond Loya's expectations. I don't care about the details, I just need the result, as long as it's done. Loya was very satisfied with Jones' performance. Excluding the time required for the voyage, the other party could conquer the island turtle before the end of the year. It was beyond his expectations. So, what should I do next? Lying on the bed, the frail Jones stared at a photo quietly by the moonlight. It was a photo taken by Minnie sitting in the balcony garden. The beautiful figures on the screen were beyond Jones' expectations. That familiar yet unfamiliar feeling warmed Jones' heart. Next step. Loya held her chin and touched the stubborn beard. The next step is to come to the great root first, but remember not to reveal your identity, just stay in the first half. Okay, then I can have a good rest. Jones breathed a sigh of relief, his tone relaxed. Right, Captain. Chapter 222 Trading Mail Sign. Island tortoise, as the name suggests, is a huge tortoise with a size comparable to an island. It first appeared in the one-piece theatrical version of Mechanical Giants of the Organ City. Although it played the role of connecting the main line, it actually came out to play Chan Oil. Ever since he realized that he could not get seasick in enslaved animals, Loya had the idea of this creature at the time. It's not that he didn't think about using modeling magic to make a ship as a means of transportation, but at that time, because of the limitation of magic strength and magic power, this method was just thrown out of his head after a whirl in his head. Of course, if you want to sail across the ocean, ships made of ice are not very safe. So when Loya recalled the island turtle that appeared in the theatrical version, he made up his mind to get it. I originally thought that this matter would need to be resolved slowly when I was free, but who would have thought that something like Jones would happen? That's a coincidence, isn't it? And as an island for Luffy and their novice dungeon, the enemies on the mechanical island are really weak. Jones, one of the giants of the Dark World, was much stronger than Luffy at that time. As a result, it was almost sweeping and rolling, and it only took one day for Jones to complete the work of subduing all the residents of the island. As for Karakri's ambition to conquer the world, it ended in vain before it started. It's just that this time it didn't end in the hands of the Son of Destiny, Straw Hat Luffy, but in the hands of the more terrifying and powerful Roha. After telling Jones what to do next, Loya hung up the phone bug. He looked up at the bright moon outside the window, and an inexplicable smile emerged from the corner of his mouth. It looks like the plan has to be accelerated. Otherwise, I won't be able to make it to the final stage. The next day, the G9 branch port. It's sunny and cloudless in 1010 today. In other words, the windless zone is really hard. There is no sea breeze. Even in this season of late autumn and early winter, it can be deadly hot without a fan. No wonder the girls on Nine Snake Island are wearing so cool clothes. Luo Ya summed up. But fortunately, he is of the ice attribute. A large lump of ice fell from the sky and landed on the port, which directly solved the problem of heat. Just. Hey, you guys! Lieutenant General Habuluo shouted and ran over, throwing the guys who were sticking to the ice cubes to cool off. What are you doing here? Hurry up and help Lieutenant General Loya carry it. Supplies must be finished before noon. Yes. Working in such hot weather is not a pleasant thing. Several soldiers replied feebly, moving slowly, but before Lieutenant General Habulo broke out again, he escaped in a hurry. Watching them run away, Oblo turned around and smiled at Loya. Sorry for making you see a joke, I was too relaxed with them. Saying that, Habulo smeared ice with one hand, feeling the icy stimulation, and shivered comfortably. Oh, it's been a long time since I've experienced this feeling. The ice we reserved last month. It's been used up, and I don't even have any left now. Ice cubes. Loya pondered the meaning of what Habuluo said to himself, and then replied somewhat speechlessly, It's fine for you to say these things clearly, Lieutenant General Habuluo. Anyway, I don't need to consume anything to make ice cubes. Ah, haha, is it so obvious? Ha 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 ha. Habuluo smiled awkwardly but politely, a marinated egg shimmering dazzlingly in the sun. Huh. Loya sighed, waved his hand, and said, Forget it, let's go. Where are you going? Habuluo looked at Loya in a daze. In response, Loya looked at him in shock. Of course it's your ice cellar. Don't tell me you don't even have an ice cellar here. Oh, understood. Oblo widened his eyes with joy, then waved to Major General Alex who was receiving the ideological education of flying squirrels over there. Alex. Hurry up and take Lieutenant General Loya to the ice cellar. Ice cubes are available. Got. Ice cubes. At the port, all the soldiers of the G9 branch stopped and stared blankly at Oblo who was yelling. Then, thunderous cheers sounded. Great, we've got ice cubes. Finally I can take a sip of ice water. What a horrible weather. Long live Lieutenant General Loya. Looking at the excited soldiers in front of him, Loya asked Habulo with a weird expression, By the way, Lieutenant General Habulo, have you never bought ice cubes outside before? Although most of the New World is occupied by the four emperors, the power of the Navy should not be underestimated. It shouldn't be very difficult to find some ice to come back, right? This. Oblo continued to smile awkwardly and politely. The warship needs to spend a lot of money every time it sails, so every time we go to sea when we buy necessary supplies, the rest I always wait for the supplies from the headquarters to arrive. As for the ice cubes. So, I didn't buy it because I was reluctant to spend money. Loya added what Oblo couldn't say in his heart, and then sighed heavily. Really, it's not easy. No wonder Flying Squirrel kept saying that the conditions here were difficult, but it turned out to be the case. So, in the next few hours, Loya not only filled the ice cellar built in the branch with ice cubes, but also used magic to dig a huge deep pit and fill them up again. When Loya is completed, a huge ice lake with an area of several hundred meters has been added on the island of the G9 branch. Looking at the glacial lake that was blinding in the sun, Lieutenant General Habulo shook Loya's hand excitedly. Thank you so much. Even if the surface of the ice lake will melt due to the temperature, the ice that is buried hundreds of meters below the ice lake can be preserved to some extent. This move not only solved the living problem of Habuluo and the others who were in urgent need of ice, but also helped them solve the freshwater resources. How could Habuluo not be excited? Welcome, everyone as a navy. We enjoy a superior environment in the headquarters, but you are guarding the sea here. If you really want to say it, it should be us who want to say thank you. After doing this, Loya also lost his strength, but under the effect of the powerful dragon body, this consumption can be replenished in a short time. With Loya's feat of creating an ice lake without a word, the soldiers' actions next were almost the same as fighting chicken blood. Obviously, after carrying the materials, the warship has to go through a series of tedious inspections before going to sea, and the time must be at least 3 o'clock in the afternoon. As a result, it was already noon, and Lieutenant General Hablo came to inform them that they could set sail. Thousands of people are doing only one thing in full swing, and the efficiency is really terrifying. After a simple lunch, Loya and the flying squirrel went out to sea under the excited eyes of the G9 branch navy. Meanwhile, the devastated Ian Island. Tony finally looked back at the small island that left him with deep memories, and silently boarded Shank's ship. After they all left, in the small town of the island, those destroyed buildings suddenly squirm. The dry broken wood twisted and slowly crawled back to where it should have been before like a long snake. Pieces of masonry planks were passed by the wriggling walls to the large shattered hole in the roof, and then stuck to it, quickly repairing the hole. The solid ground rippled like a lake, and the dust and debris on it slowly sank into the soil, slate, and wooden ground below. Soon, the buildings were clean and tidy again. Waiting for all the buildings on the island to be repaired under this strange change, Ian Island suddenly let out a dull groan. Hold head high. Then, with the monstrous waves, the whole island slowly sank into the sea. Looking from the sea, a ray of Yuhi-colored light emanated from the huge shadow below the sea, like an eye, staring silently, suffocating. Chapter 223 Return to Headquarters. A month later, the Navy headquarters. It seems that he felt the urgency of everyone. Along the way, Tam often encountered the windy days, so it took a lot less time than when they left. Seeing the warships neatly entering the port and docking, Zephyr showed a satisfied smile. At least, he'll be in a good mood until he knows about Tony. Bang bang bang. Bang bang bang. 2 consecutive shots were fired neatly, representing another warrior returning from a bloody battle. Hearing the gunshots, the busy soldiers at the port stopped one after another, stealing respectful glances at Flying Squirrel and Loya. This kind of gaze became more intense after they saw the soldiers behind each other who were mostly bandaged. Although I don't know what mission they are performing, it will definitely not be an easy job for the dignified Navy to send out 2 lieutenant generals in the headquarters and still suffer heavy losses. I'm back. Looking at the familiar scene in front of him, Loya sighed. The past few months have made him really tired of watching the scenery at sea, and now he wants to go back to his big bed and have a good sleep. After all, the back of Pippi Shrimp is not a good place to sleep. Through the crowd, he saw Zephyr standing on the edge of the square at a glance, and that touch of purple was still so charming. So, Loya turned his head and pretended not to see it. This tiny movement made Zephyr's eyelids twitch for a while, because he suddenly had a bad premonition. Salute. Accompanied by the cry of the team leader who greeted the team, a neat salute sounded at the port. Amid the cheers of the crowd, a group of people stepped off the warship one by one. And our Lord Zephyr, staring at the wave breakers, counted them one by one. Debert, Minder, Arudo. Simon is there too. Then, there will be no more people going down on the warship. Wait a minute, there's one more. Zephyr's eyes widened suddenly. Yes, Tony, where's Tony? At this moment, not only Loya, but even the flying squirrel felt a deep chill. It was as if they were being targeted by some terrifying beast, and the biting icy cold rushed straight from the tailbone to their foreheads, causing them both to get goosebumps. This feeling, Loya, have you found anything? The flying squirrel involuntarily touched the hilt of the sword and looked around vigilantly. At the same time, he is also a little strange. This is the headquarters of the Navy. Who would show such strong killing intent to them? Well, Loya put his fingers on his face, and said without changing his face, "It should be Teacher Zephyr." Zephyr. Flying Squirrel suddenly felt that it was a very wrong decision to drag on and dare not tell Zephyrtony before. "Hey, Loya, is my wave breaker doing okay?" Jim, who was running over here, waved to Loya with a look of anticipation waiting for the evaluation. However, before he finished speaking, he saw Loya soaring directly into the sky, flying into the sky in the blink of an eye. Then, the one who stayed in place was a flying squirrel that looked like he could not love salted fish. Just when he was at a loss, a purple figure suddenly appeared behind him. The pitch-black fist represented the opponent wrapping himself with armament hockey, which was aggressive. "Bastard, you bring me back." Zephyr angrily crossed the top of his head and punched Loya on the horizon. This move is very familiar to Loya, because in the battle with Zephyr, Zephyr has used it countless times against the terrifyingly fast-moving speed. As a pure-body technique powerhouse, or a former admiral of the Navy, whoever thinks that Zephyr and the others have no way of long-range attack would be very wrong. And Zephyr was more serious than Carp, and he had no interest in throwing shells. So his long-range attack is a kind of air cannon that compresses the air and shoots out by punching at extreme speed. This move is somewhat similar to the impact of the bear's paw formed by a bear slapping the air, but with a smaller killing range and range. But within the range and the killing radius, the power of this move is extremely powerful. "Damn it, you didn't go this far last time, who are you fooling?" Luoya was startled at first, but then reacted and teased Zephyr. However, "Who told you that the old man was fighting the air?" Zephyr showed a wicked smile, and he became a little more cunning after contacting Loya more. Whoosh! Bang! A thing directly hit Loya in the air, knocking him down directly from the air. In the shattered ice, some black and silver-white metal stood out in the sunlight. That's a lighter." Flying Squirrel silently watched this scene and shivered involuntarily. People who smoke, so scary. Loya hit the middle. Dusk has come, and Hiroshi's Navy fortress is bathed in the sunset glow. The light from the setting sun on the sea, like many golden needles and silver threads, swayed with the water waves. Everything is so beautiful and peaceful. At least, the place outside the courtyard of the elite camp on the second floor of the fortress is quiet and peaceful. Using a lighter is a heresy. Loya smashed the stone table in front of Zephyr with a heavy foot. Between the rubble sputtering, he raised the matchbox in his hand high. To feel the true aroma of a cigar, matches are the right way. "You say that, Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel?" This is it." The flying squirrel rolled the eyes of the dead fish, and the purple hair of the moxie on its head drooped on both sides. "I don't like smoking cigars very much, I really don't know that. After all, can you not bring the topic to me?" Didn't you see Teacher Zephyr's face turning black? Sure enough, after Loya finished speaking, Zephyr smashed his head directly with a fist, and instantly shook his head into the soil in front of him. "As I talking about this now, I'll teach you a lesson if I mess up again. So, can we say this before we fight?" Loya pulled himself out helplessly, sat back in his seat, put his hands on his knees, and said obediently, "Okay Teacher Zephyr, no problem, Teacher Zephyr." Although the attitude is much better now, where does this urge to hit people come from? After teaching a certain unreliable disciple a little, Zephyr sighed heavily. "Hey, I really don't know if you were right or wrong." Granted, they agreed to keep Tony and Shanks together for good reason. However, the other party is the fourth emperor after all. In all fairness, Zephyr also believes that Shanks is a man who is trustworthy and entrusted, unlike those vicious pirates. But as a teacher, as well as the chief instructor of the Naval Recruit Battalion, Zephyr was extremely angry at Tony staying with Shanks. In a big way, this is tantamount to betraying the Navy. But fortunately, there is the blood marrow worm, which can make him feel a little more at ease. He can only comfort himself like this now, saying that Tony did this for the sake of countless people. I will announce the matter of Tony is missing. Zephyr smoked a cigar and said lightly, but I won't hide it from Sengoku. So, a year later, Loya. Yes. Loya stood up and saluted. If Tony doesn't want to come back, he even said that he has become a pirate. Zephyr's voice suddenly became cold. You know what to do. Ah yes, I know. Loya calmly looked at the pair of eyes full of contradictions and pain, and nodded solemnly. I know, Teacher Zephyr. After all, we are the Navy. Chapter 224 Video Works of Engineering Mail. The next day, the fortress of the naval headquarters, the marshal's office. This is just bullshit. Boom. The corner of the desk was directly smashed by the angry Akainu. He stood up exuding scalding heat, staring fiercely at Flying Squirrel and Roha, as if he would shoot directly in the next second. The Navy doesn't need this compromised justice. However, at the same time, a biting cold wind blew through the office, blowing away the scorching airflow brought by Akainu. Kuzan. Akainu turned his head, glared angrily at Kuzan who pushed the blindfold up, bit Kiba and said, Are you trying to cover them up? Although it was an interrogative sentence, Akainu used a positive tone. La, don't jump to conclusions, Admiral Akainu. Kuzan moved himself over from the side of the chair, resting his elbows on the table, resting his chin on the back of his hands. Everyone knows about the Navy and pirates. There must be a reason for Roha and the Flying Squirrel to make this decision. Quote. Am I right, Loya? As for the steps given by Kuzan, Loya will naturally not deny it, otherwise the extreme Akainu might really make a move, and that scene must not be fun. Yes, Mr. Kuzan. After speaking, he took out the phone bug that had been prepared for a long time and placed it on the desk. This is the video material recorded by the military secretary, please take a look at it. He pointed the phone bug at the empty wall, and the Flying Squirrel on the other side walked to the window and closed the curtain, and the light in the room suddenly dimmed. Then, the Flying Skier nodded to Loya, indicating that it can start. Blue. Following Loya's action of pressing the button, the orange-yellow phone bug, Blue, called out, his closed eyes suddenly widened, and two strong lights shot out directly from its eyes, projecting on the opposite side. On the wall. Boom. Laugh. The beginning of the picture is a fierce fight. The Flying Squirrel, who took the lead as the spear tip in front of the team, led the soldiers to fight hard in the midst of countless insects the size of human heads. This scene made the hot-tempered Akainu unable to pick a thorn, and even said that he couldn't help but be more satisfied with the Flying Squirrel. To be honest, Akainu is quite satisfied with the other party except for the fact that he is from the Kuzan line. Then, the screen turned, and dozens of huge Yui-colored tentacles as thick as buckets filled the entire screen. The sharp Kiba teeth on it tell everyone that this thing is not vegetarian. In fact, this is exactly the case. During this breakout, even if the Flying Squirrel exerted 12 points of strength to protect the soldiers, and even said that he was injured, many navies still lost their lives. The sounds of chewing, screaming, broken bones, and torn muscles were mixed together to tell everyone how sinister the situation was at that time. Is this the mutant blood worm mentioned in the documentation? It's really scary and scary. Huang Yuan pouted and commented vulgarly. The sky turned from light to dark and then from dark to light. After a night of heavy breakouts, Flying Squirrel and the others finally arrived at the small town on the island. The appearance of the restaurant owner made everyone gasp, and even Sengoku, who was always calm and unmoved, couldn't help but stand up. This is simply, human beings. Now they somewhat understand why they let Tony risk his life to inherit the power of the Titans, and why they agreed with Shanks and let Tony stay in the New World. Because once these monsters that can disguise themselves as human beings will flood from the New World. At that time, it is really hard to say who is in charge of this world. One day, your closest family members and companions suddenly opened their mouths and spit out a lot of granulation to eat you. That scene was terrifying just thinking about it. And this is not the end. When Loya cleaned up the blood worms with absolute strength, the picture suddenly changed, and Hukei's huge head also shocked everyone. Not to mention anything else, just this body type is enough to make the whole world tremble. But this is not the end. After that, Hook's explosion and Tony's successful evolution, turning into a titan, directly made them feel cold in their hands and feet. It turns out that there is such a horrible thing in our world. Moreover, this thing has an instinctive hostility to all living beings. At the end of the picture, the flying squirrel passing through the forest joins with Loya and Alex and leaves together. Click. The phone worm let out a soft call and fell into a deep sleep again. Likewise, the marshal's office at the moment fell into silence. Seeing the silence of the big guys in front of him, Loya winked at the flying squirrel secretly, as if to say, "How about it, I'll say this method will work, right?" In this regard, the latter responded with a look of, "You are amazing," and silently opened the curtains. Of course, this phone bug is not the one that the clerk carried with him, including the video for them, which has also been reprocessed and processed by Loya. Thanks to the great creator for giving this world such an unscientific thing as the phone bug. Let Loya, an engineering man, edit such a shocking movie with just a few phone bugs. Yes, it's a movie. As a traveler from the Earth, Loya said, "Isn't it a Hollywood blockbuster? Haven't seen pig run or eaten pork." He deleted some dialogues that were enough to touch the big guys, or just refer to a Kainu's G-spot, exaggerating the difficulty of this mission and the danger of bloodworms. The upward perspective also makes Tony's body so impressive and looks so invincible. I believe that if this is the case, even a Kainu may not be able to say anything about Tony's behavior in staying with Shanks. At this moment, Loya suddenly felt a gaze, and when he looked in the direction, he realized that it was Kuzan. He had a panoramic view of Loya's small movements, and turned his head until Loya's back was numb. It's not that he doesn't want to care about it, it's Kuzan's consistent rule. Moreover, at this moment, the big man has already spoken. The sun shines in again and sprinkles on everyone, bringing a touch of warmth. Seemingly awakened by the sudden light, Sengoku froze for a second, then he picked up the document in his hand and started to review the mission report again. I actually want to use this kind of thing to live forever. Sengoku thought. The courage of the Tianlong people is really unexpected. The danger of blood marrow worms is no less than that of bomb rocks, and this kind of thing must also be in the hands of the Navy. When the other party has generated wisdom now, it is impossible to completely control it. Well, this is the end of the matter. I will negotiate the report on the world government and the Tianlong people. Sengoku coded the document and handed it directly to the goat beside him. As for Tony, let him clean up blood marrow worms in the new world with peace of mind, while monitoring Yuhi Shank's every move. That's it, let's go. This time, Akainu finally stopped talking. Because he can also see that the blood marrow worm will not be eliminated in one day, and the whole world will be shrouded in crisis. This is the real danger of extinction. However, Sengoku's last sentence is a bit redundant. As long as Shanks doesn't stay in the new world, it's the same wherever he is, whether he is under surveillance or not, it can only be said to have peace of mind. After the meeting, Loa was left alone by Sengoku. Sengoku's eyes were complicated when faced with the famed rookie in the Navy. Yuhi Shanks, you really will find a way out for yourself, Loya. Chapter 225 Plan to Expose. From the very beginning, Loya never thought that his plans could be hidden from the old man in front of him. After all, the other party was the famous Admiral Sengoku, General of Wisdom. Sengoku can become an admiral, not because of slack and so-called loyalty to the world government. It is true that strength is also a very important assessment factor, but he is sitting in this position, relying more on his brain that is sufficient at any time. So facing Sengoku's sudden question, Loya was stunned for a while, then calmly pulled out the chair and sat down. Have you seen it, Marshal Sengoku? Ah, this is an obvious thing. Sengoku replied. Of the people who were there just now, I'm afraid the flying squirrel didn't come around this bend. Even if the rest of the people don't know about you and Zephy's plan, they see something about Tony. The authorities are obsessed with bystanders. Loya nodded his head quietly. This is indeed my negligence. So I am afraid you need to pay more attention to the rest of the people, and our plan can't be exposed yet. But, quote. Speaking of this, Loya watched Sengoku quietly. You should be very clear, I am with you. Humph. I can't guarantee this. Sengoku snorted coldly, but he was still very clear about Loya's character. What he said was an iron sword, spitting and nails, which made him a little relieved. A little. However, he still reminded. 4 emperors, it's not something you can touch now, Loya. Sengoku said, in this world, in addition to power, the more important thing is strength. Strength is the most important qualification certificate, and you are now not strong enough. Loya's strength is obvious to all. Since the end of the live broadcast on the day he graduated, the movement of the big pirates has subsided a little in the past few months, which is enough to show its deterrent power. So Sengoku couldn't say the word that he was still weak, and chose not strong enough instead. Tisk, although this is expected, it's still a little uncomfortable to hear you say it. I understand. Loya sighed and prepared to get up and leave. At this moment, Sengoku suddenly whispered something behind his back. Then get stronger as soon as possible, Loya. This world doesn't need a second One Piece. Hey, the second One Piece. Ha ha. Loya was amused for some reason, but the laughter only lasted for a while and then stopped abruptly. He looked back at Sengoku and said, ah, yes, I understand. Then, he opened the door of the office and walked out. What remained behind was Sengoku's deep gaze. After walking out of the office, before he had time to stretch himself, Loya had to tilt his head to avoid an ice spear. Looking at Kuzan leaning against the corridor, Loya took a deep breath. Troubles come one after the other. Sengoku was right, no one in the audience could not see the tricks in it. Kuzan is naturally one of them. But he didn't start asking directly, but waved to Loya. Let's go to the small square. I haven't tested your strength for several months, right? Well, it's been about 3 months. Loya said with a smile. My current strength may surprise you, Mr. Kuzan. La, then I'll really wait and see. Talking, the two walked side by side and left the fortress side by side. No, Lieutenant General Loya is going to duel with General Aokiji again. Quickly notify the logistics department. Prepare for emergency repairs. A group of soldiers rushed over from a distance, put down the building materials on their shoulders, and ran away in a hurry. This scene fell in the eyes of Loya and Aokiji, and both of them felt a little embarrassed. Are we going a little too far in the past? No, not right. Aokiji looked at Loya beside him and nodded affirmatively. Look, Loya, you have gone too far in the past. Blame me. Luoya was shocked at Qingzi's cheeky. Obviously he was in the process of demolition, and Qingzi was able to shake the blame so calmly. So, this time you. Before Qingzi's words were finished, a light blue lightning came to him, and the dragon wings behind Loya spread out in the air, releasing a terrifying cold to his heart's content, and the blue magic light condensed in his hand. In the blink of an eye, endless ice spewed out. Ice storm. Of course it's a familiar recipe and a familiar taste. Whoa! The icy and biting ice storm blew across the square, instantly freezing the entire square. The thick layer of ice only wraps the square, and the decoration here is like the icy hell that pushes the city, showing Loya's unique and sophisticated control of magic. Both sides are ice attribute abilities, and in such an environment, the strength that can be exerted will be stronger than usual. And Loya raised his palm at Kuzan, who was dodging the first wave of attacks. Ice Fall's funeral. La, what a warm welcome ceremony. Kuzan glanced at the solid ice cubes rolled up from all directions, and opened his hands, facing each side from left to right. Unfortunately I can't accept it. Boom. 2 ice spears shot out, directly smashing the left and right ice layers. And taking advantage of this moment, Kuzan stomped hard on the cold ice that came from below, and drilled out of the ice blockade with his shaver. Falling to the ground, Aokiji wiped the non-existent sweat from his forehead. Yohu, I almost forgot, you kid can control the ice around you. While saying this, Aokiji continued to step on the ground. Boom. Aokiji is not the kind of slanted student of Kizaru. Although his strength is not as strong as ZFA and other strong physical skills, it is definitely not small. The strong vibration under this foot makes the fortress beside him tremble. Boom. Crash. The hard layer of ice was smashed to pieces and turned into ice slag, revealing the jagged stone floor below. Then you can't control them, do you? Then it's my turn now. Boom. Boom. Jump card. For the next few hours, ice and cold currents, explosions and roars, became the main theme of today's Malin Fodder. In the cafeteria of the recruit camp, Ms. S held a tobacco pouch, slowly twisted the tobacco rod with tobacco leaves, and took out a match to light it. Huh. It's really a familiar scene. It turns out that admirals are not easy roles to play with. Even if the ice cubes injected with magic power by Loya can directly touch their entities, ignoring the elementalization that is invincible in the eyes of most people, but facing Kuzan, who is getting more and more excited, he is not an opponent at all. However, in terms of durability, he is much stronger than Kuzan. The nose is blue, the face is swollen, and the hand is dislocated. For the current Loya, this level of injury is just a small injury that can be recovered in a minute or two. But it took half an hour to put it on Kuzan, and he could still be seen secretly rubbing his wound and grinning at Kiba. Of course, Kuzan is injured like this, and Loya's ending is naturally not much better. If it wasn't for the strong defense of the dragon scales, there would have been countless blood holes in his body. But the drooping hands and the eyes that could only open a line told others that his injuries were much worse than Kuzan. When the battle was over, a group of logistical soldiers in charge of maintenance looked at the small square in front of them with tears in their eyes, and watched the two leave with resentment. Walking on the quiet path, Kuzan suddenly said, "By the way, Loya, Jones. Is he still alive?" Geek. Loya's heart jumped, and she raised her eyelids to look at Kuzan's eyes. Ha ha ha, how is that possible? I killed him myself. But the louder he laughed, the more guilty he seemed. Moreover, the look in Kuzan's eyes told him that he was not confirming Jones' life or death to him, but his choice. Looking at Loya's appearance, Aokiji snorted lightly. Is that so? I thought he was the one I saw. Looks like I made a mistake. Facing Kuzan's eyes, Loya smiled dryly. Well, it must be the teacher, you were wrong. Chapter 226 crossed home. Aokiji learned that Jones was still alive, which is not a good thing. It's not that Loya didn't trust Kuzan and wanted to hide him on purpose. But because this matter involves too much, of course, the fewer people in the know, the better. Moreover, including Zephyr and Sengoku, they only know what Loya said, not what he planned in his heart. If Aokiji starts to investigate privately, Loya's sloppy guts can't hide the man closest to him. So as soon as he returned to the house that Sengoku distributed to him alone after becoming a lieutenant general, Loya couldn't wait to take out the phone bug. Blue blue, blue blue. Hey, Loya, is there something wrong? On the other end of the phone bug, Zephyr was instructing Aldo to practice. Seeing that it was Loya's phone, he motioned for Aldo to leave, and walked to the unoccupied window. After a while, after listening to Loya's story, Zephyr only felt a pain in Kiba. What the hell, how did Kuzan know that Jones was alive? Who knows? Loya said, feeling a little speechless, but fortunately, Admiral Akainu and Admiral Kizaru still don't know the news, otherwise the fun will be great. But now in the entire Navy, except for me and you, only Marshal Sengoku and Lieutenant General Suru know about this. Could it be the information they leaked? For Loya's speculation, Zephyr directly denied it. Absolutely impossible. How could Suru-chan agree to such a completely meaningless thing? Crane-chan. Loya rolled the eyes of the dead fish and smiled. So, Mr. Zephyr, you should avoid getting too close to that old man carp. What a shameless and unreliable guy he is. But aside from the question of title, what Zephyr said was the truth. The Navy at this stage cannot be said to be the most powerful period in naval history, but it is definitely the smartest period. Wisdom General Sengoku and General Staff Officer Crane carried the audience aggressively, and with a pig teammate like Carp, they could raise the average IQ of the Navy's top management to a higher level. With their IQs, they can't see how low-key this matter needs to be. Maybe he saw it when he was out on a mission. Zephyr guessed. Actually, there is no problem with him knowing. Loya said. He knew how confused Aokiji's identity became after he failed to compete with Akainu for the position of marshal in the later period of the original work. What is certain is that there must be someone behind him to support him. And the intelligence system of this force must be very developed, and it can be hidden in the mechanical island. No, it was discovered by Jones, who was renamed Turtle Island by Loya. As for Jones taking the initiative to reveal his situation, Loya believes that as long as Minnie is in his hands, it is impossible for the other party to not follow his orders. Taking 110,000 steps back, even if the three generals are besieging Loya now, as long as he is willing, he is confident enough to kill Minnie before he is killed. Look at his final decision. Zephyr sighed and said, fortunately, Aokiji is not an Akainu, and it's not that extreme. Things have to be turned around. That's all there is to it. After all, the other party is a green pheasant, and Loya really feels numb about this. It was night. Lying on his long-lost big bed, Loya quickly fell into a deep sleep. Although Sengoku arranged for him the same Japanese-style courtyard as Akainu, but under the modification of Loya, there is nothing too Japanese-style here. It's not that Loya's angry youth is at fault, the real reason is just because he can't sleep on tatami. Even if it was made by the ancestors of the Han people. Especially the bedroom that he vacated, except for posters and figures, which can only be seen on Earth, this room is not much different from the room before he crossed. The golden den, the silver den, is not as good as your own dog kennel. Not to mention that Pippi Shrimp sleeps on its back, it is not as good as a dog kennel. So Loya slept very sweetly. When he woke up, he felt refreshed and all the fatigue of the months was gone. Yo, what the hell? It's so hot. Sleepy eyes glanced at the bright yellow curtains, and the sunlight that climbed in through the curtains was so dazzling. Blinking his eyes, Loya patted his head. I forgot to close the window last night. I'm really talented with the air conditioner on and the sun. Wait a minute. At this time, Loya's stretching action suddenly stopped, and the whole person froze there. This feeling is air conditioning. Whoa. Loya lifted the quilt and rushed straight to the corner of the room, looking up at the familiar white square. It's the same old ugly brand hanging air conditioner. The original selling point of Shizune has now become an annoying mosquito sound. But even in disrepair, this sturdy air conditioner still delivers enough coolness on a hot summer day. The posters on the wall, the buzzing computer, the cluttered wardrobe, everything tells Loya. It's time for you to clean the room. Wrong. Did I cross back? Ding dong ding ding dong ding 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 ding. A familiar and unfamiliar bell rang, awakening the shocked Loya. This is, yes, my cell phone ringing. Loya rolled over and threw herself on the bed, tore off the pillow and the quilt, and finally found the thing that always got up and looked for a long time. On the screen of the mobile phone, in addition to those few big characters that are more conspicuous, the photo that the owner of the number took when he was bungee jumping was also eye-catching. Hello, boss, Loya asked cautiously. Ah, you bastard, what time is it? Do you still want to work? If I remember correctly, when I was traveling, I was on a small vacation, right? How long has it been since time to travel back? My boss asked me to go to work, which means I didn't have a good time at all. This holiday is gone. It's not. Just when Loya was thinking about this question, a roar sounded again on the phone. You have an appointment with a client who is already waiting for you at the company. I'll give you 5 minutes, and get over here immediately. 5 minutes. Roja screamed. It took me more than 5 minutes to get from home to the station. 1 hour. You first let Xiaolu help me with it. An hour. Shame on you. If this list is gone, your bonus this month will also be gone. Half an hour can't be more. Deal, I'll be there soon. After that, Loya hung up the phone and hurriedly dressed and changed his pants, combed his hair and washed his face. If half an hour passes, it will only take 10 minutes, and there are 20 minutes left at liberty. After finishing everything, Loya opened the door and walked out of the room. When passing by the mirror in the corridor, he turned his head and glanced at himself in the mirror. It was a familiar and unfamiliar baby face, and the natural baby fat made him look young and childish at the same time. Hey, trying to lose weight is in vain. Shaking his head helplessly, Loya walked out of the door dejectedly. Chapter 227 Brother Lihu was pitted. Good morning. No, good afternoon Loya. As soon as she stepped into the door of the company, Sister Lu at the front desk greeted Loya with a wink. Although this is the ace marketing in the company, he is an excellent employee in the eyes of pervert. However, he skipped work today and until now, there is absolutely nothing good waiting for him. Didn't you see that the fat on big dead pervert's body started to shake? That was his habit of simmering fire. Hee, good noon. Loya greeted the other party helplessly and asked, by the way, where is the boss? He said that I have a client coming. Is it in the reception room or my office? It should be in your office. Lu Mizi frowned uncertainly, because the boss took people directly to the second floor today, and Wang is still cleaning the reception room. Last night, Brother Ju and the others drank too much, opened the door and danced inside, and vomited. Oh, so it is. Loya snorted, but said it was not surprising at all. Ninth brother, formerly known as Feng Julu, is the brother-in-law of pervert who died. In addition to not adding trouble to pervert's work, it is in line with all the models that slap the face of the little brother-in-law in the city. As for why he is called Ju, of course it's because 6 has been turned over. Saying goodbye to Sister Lu, Loya came to his office. Before entering the door, I heard Xiaolu arguing with a stranger inside. Brother, you are going too far. And I really can't control this matter. Then call your boss, and I'll ask him directly. He should be a rude man by the sound of his voice, and as soon as he heard the voice, he knew that his owner was extremely angry. So, Loya began to try hard to recall why he was looking for such a customer before he crossed. However, Xiaolu is obviously unable to bear hold, and now is the rhythm of his own appearance to save the world. Dong dong dong. Hearing the knock on the door, the 2 people in the room were stunned. Then Xiaolu said to the bearded man, Brother, you have a cup of tea first, and I'll open the door. After speaking, he walked directly to the door and opened it without waiting for the other person to reply. As soon as he saw Loya, the fat little Lu suddenly became excited. Brother Luo, my brother. You are finally here. I heard you arguing all the way, what's going on? Loya didn't rush in first, but asked about the situation. Xiaolu took off his glasses and wiped the sweat from his forehead. Hey, it's not the list that pervert said a few months ago. People have finally put down the bid, and it has cost more than 30 million so far. I still owe a loan to Silver Bank. As a result, there is a message on it that the development of the area will be changed. What are you talking about? Quote. Change regional development. How can they change for these third-tier broken cities? There is so much money. Happy after opening. Loya snorted disdainfully. Okay, leave this to me, you can do it first. Quote. Okay, my brother. Come back and invite you to dinner. Xiaolu said in surprise, and ran away in a hurry. By the way, the information is on the table, you should pay attention to it. Got it. After answering, Loya tidied up his collar and pushed in the door with a warm smile. Oh, my brother Li. You can call me if you have something and wait for me to deal with it. I'm so embarrassed to be a younger brother for running the company so far. Luoya greeted the beard familiarly, at the same time took out a cigarette and handed it over. As the saying goes, don't hit the smiling person when you reach out. In the face of Luoya's showing of weakness, even if the other party doesn't pick up the cigarette, he has to wait for a while. But it should be really anxious. The bearded brother Lee directly patted Luoya's hand away. Don't talk to me, I'll call you. You answer. I've called you in these 3 days. You didn't answer a dozen calls. I'm just here to ask, how to solve this matter. I invested 30 million yuan, but my wife didn't agree, and now I and my children have moved back to their parents' house. You said I. Having said this, Beard took a deep breath and calmed himself down a little. You have to give your brother a way to survive. Luoya wasn't annoyed by the rude clap of the bearded man. Although he was not a professional salesperson, he was a marketer. I've never seen anything strange before. It's even more rude than this. Not to mention that the other party is still so anxious now. After listening to the other party's words, Luoya continued to hand over the cigarette and comforted. Don't worry, my phone was broken before and couldn't be turned on. You smoke a cigarette first, and I'll see what's going on now. It was only now that Beard finally took the cigarette, and he was about to take out the lighter from Kabuto, but saw Luoya raised his hand, spinning the lighter at his fingertips, and brought it to his mouth at once. Click. Bright sparks brought scorching heat, and he lit the cigarette in his hands and sat back. After lighting the cigarette, Luoya had time to pick up the information on the table and read it. It turned out that things had to start 3 days ago. The city where Luoya lives is going to be developed, and everyone understands the profit. Therefore, except for some big things that cannot be touched, many people rushed to hear the news, wanting to take a piece of it. Among these people, Beard is one of them. As for development, it stands to reason that the stocks of the corresponding industries, especially the building materials factories that cooperate with them, should rise gradually. But since 3 days ago, that large green is distressing. I fell in love with a wild horse, but there is no grassland in my home. Now there are grasslands, but no horses. At this moment, the owner of a steel city asked Beard, saying that he still had a batch of goods there. If he asked him if he wanted it, he could give him a 20% discount. Then, Beard realized that something was not quite right. When asked, someone told him that due to some reasons above, the area that was planned to be developed in the past few years will be postponed. It's not clear whether it's because of money or something. Anyway, I'm not in a hurry now, I'll have to wait a few years. This makes the Beard a bit numb. You are not a fool. That piece of land is a wasteland, the kind that birds don't shit. I smashed a lot of money into it, waiting for you to start developing and making a fortune, and now you tell me not to do it. Beard has invested all his belongings in it, and if this is done, even if it is still to be developed in the future, the loan from Silver Bank will not be repaid in the past few years. He's stuck in the middle right now, unable to move forward, unable to retreat, as if he's in a hurry. Shouldn't that be right? Luoya said strangely. With our boss's relationship, his news can't be wrong. Then what's going on in this situation now? The bearded brother Lee said dejectedly. Xiao Luo, you also know that brother is a shameful person. Brother is really helpless now, so this will come to you. You said, what should I do about this? Wait, let me stroke. Luoya raised his chin while comforting his beard. Suddenly, he raised his head and took out the screenshot of the stock market on the document. This is the limit. Looking at the screenshot above, a smile appeared on the corner of Luoya's mouth. I should know what's going on. After speaking, he quickly walked to the desk and turned on the computer. Did you find anything? Brother Lee asked while sitting on the sofa, his eyes were bloodshot. Here, after turning on the computer, Luoya opened a few web pages at will, and the smile on the corner of his mouth became even greater. Oh, it's really interesting. Chapter 228 Instant Noodles That Save the World. What the hell is going on, Luoya? Seeing the smile at the corner of Loya's mouth, Brother Lee asked eagerly as if he had caught some life-saving straw. By the way, Brother Lee, these news should have been told to you by others, right? Loya lit a cigarette for himself and let out a long breath. Yeah, otherwise, the bearded man said with a sullen face, in the beginning, these matters belong to the decision of the top. Apart from the rumors outside, where else can we get news? That's right, after all, if you know about this kind of thing, the bug is too big. Loya turned the computer monitor in a circle and aimed it at the sofa. Pointing to the web page above, Loya sighed and said, don't you care about the stock market on weekdays? Now the stock market is in turmoil, and everywhere is green. Naturally, the stock market of those companies is also the same, not because of some inconvenience developed. Wait a minute, what are you talking about? Brother Lee looked at Loya with a bewildered expression. The stock market is in trouble. When did this happen? Of course, it starts in June. Loya looked at the man in front of him quietly and smiled. Then, click. There was a crisp cracking sound in the room. Brother Lee's movements suddenly froze in place, and even his breathing stopped. The surrounding environment seemed to be frozen, and the air slowly cracked and stopped. Looking at the scene in front of him, Loya slowly stood up, stepped on the broken ground, and came to Beard. Huh. I know that the May Day holiday is over, so it should be May now. As he spoke, Loya silently picked up the ashtray on the sofa and shook the ash in it. But that's what happened the year before. I thought I was back, really. Pushing open the door of the office, Loya walked down the corridor. Every time he took a step, the frozen time and space increased by 1 meter. What caught my eye were the familiar people, the quarrelsome customer service couple, the girl Lou at the front desk, and the little Lou who I brought out all the way. They were all frozen, like images printed in a mirror. When he came to the reception hall, Loya looked at the meatball on the sofa, who kept playing with his little daughter, and smiled. Dude pervert, long time no see. Then he nodded to the beauty beside him. Sister-in-law, it's been a long time. Is all this a dream or something else? Loya doesn't know. When he saw the familiar news of the stock market crash, all his memories became clear. He was very impressed that night, because Pervert, who was always tough and irritable, cried like a child that night, saying that the Chinese dream of the post-70s generation was broken. And this bearded Brother Lee is not his client at all. Who I am? I am the beloved Loya. Clients are not Loya, who is not accepted by beautiful women. After walking out of the company, Loya looked back at the building that he had been away from for a year. Is it a time thing? Or is it just a dream? Of course it wasn't a dream, Loya. Suddenly, a familiar female voice echoed in the air, accompanied by that chilling chill. It was obviously a scorching summer, but Loya still felt the bone-chilling cold. This voice, is that you? Loya didn't know who the other party was, but he knew where he had heard this voice. That was the voice that came from the depths of his consciousness when he broke through the third order. Where are you? Loya asked. I am everywhere, the female voice replied. As long as you want, I am there. We're running out of time, Loya. You've flipped the switch on destruction so I can talk to you. Now we have to find an exit and get out of here. Exit. Loya looked around. The frozen street scene was so familiar. You mean we're stuck in a box right now? There are no specific words to describe here. You can think of this place as a prison where time, space, and your memory are fused together. Because you found the wrong point, this place has begun to collapse. If we don't leave before he completely collapses, we'll be stuck here forever. Quote. Trapped in this place, where there is no time, no space, no meaning to exist. So, how did I get here? Just because you slept. Loya sighed speechlessly. Escape, in other words, how should I escape? Continue to find the bug here. As he spoke, Loya pointed to a shopping mall not far away. Like that commercial, which was banned in September last year. Click. Pointed by Loya, the shopping mall in the distance was completely shattered. Cement and glass are staggered with long cracks, as if they are about to collapse in the next second. Don't do this. The voice seemed to be taken aback. You have to find something that doesn't belong here, and finding the wrong point at will only accelerate the collapse of this place. Something that doesn't belong here. Isn't that just you and me? With Loya's words, nothing happened. Okay, it doesn't look like it. Loya shrugged indifferently, but the master of the invisible voice wanted to strangle him. You still have half an hour, hurry up. Yes, don't worry. Loya smiled lightly, and the whole person suddenly began to twist. It's not the writhing of his limbs, but his shape, which ripples like a liquid. Hum. The familiar magic vibration echoed in his ears, and Loya touched the scar on his left face with his hand. I really don't suit this look. Whoa. The two dragon wings unfolded, and Loya stepped into the sky with a kick. Another half an hour, not enough is enough. Have you found anything? The voice asked. I discovered it at the beginning, but I am too lazy to take care of the room, so I have no interest in taking care of it. As Loya continued to move forward, all the places he passed were still. The location of the company in the distance has long since become pitch black, and glass-like fragments are swallowed up from time to time. Loya's flying speed is very fast. It only takes 10 minutes to get to the company. At his flying speed, this time is compressed to 1 minute. Boom. When he came to the outside of his rented room, Loya smashed the window and entered the bedroom. Is there any difference here? The voice asked. It doesn't look any different, except. Loya stepped on the bricks and pieces of wood, came to the computer desk he was familiar with, and picked up the seemingly normal bucket of instant noodles. It's just that this thing, if I remember correctly, should have been sprinkled on the beach. As he spoke, Loya inserted his long fingernails into it and picked out a piece of cold ham sausage. Put it in the mouth. Well, it's not wasted after all, at least I took a bite. Collapse. Crack. With Loya's movements, an invisible air film centered on him quickly spread out. Wherever the air film goes, whether it is a building or a pedestrian, it all becomes a shining point of light. Looking at the instant noodles slowly disappearing from his hands, Loya smacked his lips. Okay, this is the end, right? You are special. The voice hesitated for a while, then spoke slowly. Don't you hate me for leaving your family and friends for another world? Actually, apart from the fact that this place is made with your memory as a template, your life here will not be affected, you can choose to stay. In this regard, Loya said with a smile, I will always find a way to come back instead of living in real memories. Are you right, Ms. Christopher Edith? Chapter 229 Bread and Dough. In the moment just now, the name suddenly got into Loya's head, and there was a voice telling him that her name was Edith. Just like the skills he learned when he upgraded before, the information was directly passed into his brain, which made him realize instantly, but this time, it was a little different. It's like looking at flowers in the fog, always feeling that there is a layer of things in between. What does it mean that as long as you want, I exist? To understand this sentence in another way, does it mean that the owner of the sweet female voice is actually just an imaginary existence? Include her name. Edith. But beyond Loya's expectations, the other party didn't seem surprised to be called by his name. The voice was close at hand, and the tone was calm, but Loya's eyes were only blank. What? Isn't that name? Or, you don't like it? It's not about that, the voice replied, it's because. Well, you'll find out one day. Is that so? I'll just call you Edith for now. Loya didn't give the other party a chance, and decided to call him by himself. Well, if you think so. The owner of the voice seemed to be speechless, but he didn't care about Loyado. After a pause, she continued, I know you have a lot of questions to ask. There are still 3 minutes before we return to the One Piece world. Just ask what you want. 3 minutes is enough. Loya nodded and asked the question he had always wanted to know. Where did my skills go? Ah. She thought that Loya would ask her a series of philosophical questions about her origin and background, but she never thought that the other party's focus was on this thing. What? Don't say you don't know. Loya asked nervously. Do you know how fast I can learn new moves when there is a skill icon? Now, I have to use a Dragon Slayer magic. Slow down for a second, speak a lot slower. Since he broke through the third order 0 layer a few months ago, the skill panel has been away from him forever. Indeed, without the limitation of the skill panel, he compensated him for the control of dragon slaying magic in disguise, allowing him to deepen his understanding and control of magic. But here comes the problem. Lao Su was not raised by Long Niang. Do you want me and those Natsu guys who grew up with dragons to develop more than magic? This is not the case. An ice dragon's sickle has only been played once and never used. Oh, so that's what you think. What a boring man, the voice said teasingly. You should be more confident in yourself. If you don't believe me, see. Along with the voice, a light curtain appeared in front of Loya. 1111. Lucky numbers. 1112. 1113. 1100. Loya stared blankly at the screen. That was the picture of him just getting power and exercising alone on the desert island. At that time, he was still exercising with push-ups, partly because he was too unfamiliar with the sudden strength, and partly because he was idle. Then, the screen changed, and when it reappeared, it was in the dormitory of the recruit battalion of the Navy headquarters. On the picture, Loya sat quietly on the bed, holding the ice in both hands, carefully blending it together. Then, boom! The entire room turned into an ice hell, and Loya himself was wrapped in a thick layer of ice. Even looking at the image, Loya couldn't help but recall the really biting chill. Don't look at how he has mastered the ice coffin skill now, but he suffered a lot when he was developing it. The scenes flowed through, showing him all the bits and pieces of his cultivation in the world of One Piece. In the end, the picture dimmed, and the sound continued to sound. I've always been with you. Your hard work, your dedication, your tenacity, won my approval. So, I decided to let you inherit my power and become a real dragon slayer. So, I removed the skill bar you are familiar with. Cancel. Loya blinked. So you are controlling the system panel on the rotten street I saw earlier. Then what are you, system wizard? Oh, not really. The reason why I let you see such a bad street system panel is because I found that you have an inexplicable enthusiasm for database things through statistics on your daily behavior patterns. In order to avoid burnout, it is designed as a data panel, displayed in front of you. Quote. Loya. I have an inexplicable passion for digital things. You directly said that I love playing games and need electrotherapy. Different from Luo Ya's speechless, the voice was very calm, and he continued. Moreover, the first to third orders are more of a period when you inherit basic power. At this time, there is no big drawback to directly instilling power into your body. But after the third order, it is a qualitative change. If I directly hand over the power to you as before, it will do more harm than good for you. Considering it all, I cancel the system panel. At this point, Loya understood. First of all, let's put aside the fact that I love playing games, so I have an inexplicable passion for database things. The first to third orders are the so-called newcomer protection period. At this time, the other party directly pours power into their own body, so the improvement very fast. Starting from the third rank, his power is no longer a basic thing, and every point of strengthening requires more understanding of his own. Originally, at this stage, the other party could still choose to pour power into him to improve himself as before, but because of his own efforts, the other party felt that it would be much better to pursue the path of magic alone than to give it directly, so he cancelled this kind of encouragement. By the way, what will be the consequences if I continue to upgrade in the same way as before? The other party has repeatedly claimed that the advantages of doing so outweigh the disadvantages, but Loya is very curious about what the disadvantages are. The result. Do you know the difference between freshly released steamed buns and dough? So how did this get involved with steamed buns and dough? The steamed bun has already been set. No matter how he struggles in the future, whether it is made into fried steamed buns, baked or air-dried and kneaded into dough, he can only be a steamed bun. And the dough is unknown. It can be steamed buns, cakes, noodles in the future. Everything is possible. I can't tell what the drawbacks are, but it's probably like this. If I continue to instill power into you after the third rank, you will be that steamed bun. And now, I've decided to give you a chance to be the dough. Clap clap clap. Loya applauded and shook his head, and said with heartfelt admiration, "It's really a vivid metaphor." After understanding the changes in the system, Loya was undoubtedly relieved a lot. I have to admit that although I am very strong now, all of this is based on the power obtained from the Dragon Slayer system. The current situation is undoubtedly that the system developers have exposed the source code to themselves, and put all the rights of selection and modification into their own hands. What a trust this is. Chapter 230 Golden Pupil and Vegapunk. I'll go and see if the pirated version can be restrained a bit. There are more than 100 chapters in my VIP chapter. You are a fan who doesn't even have an apprenticeship, and you still come to the genuine BB plot. This is a commodity. Hey, you don't have to pay for things. You still have a face to work with BB. You are so shameless. With all due respect, with your quality, you deserve to be poor and even look down on genuine. Dashu has already said that I'm not that stingy, just watch pirated copies, and then what? Hee, kicking my nose on my face is unbearable. And next time, I will directly post the ID, so that everyone can look up to what is the poor B keyboard warrior. Separation line. It took so long to explain a problem. At this moment, the voice suddenly said, "Forget it, anyway, there will be opportunities in the future. Now the time is almost up, we should go back to Loya." Luoya heard the words and looked up. Sure enough, at the moment when they were talking, the light curtain around them had become very thin. At the same time, a black screen like a starry sky appeared, wrapping up and down all around him. Should I just stand still or not? Just don't move. The voice, "No," Edith said softly, "your every move may attract its attention. Outside the light curtain, we have no way to fight against that existence." That exist. Things seem to get complicated. Loya narrowed his eyes slightly. The starry skylight curtain became smaller and smaller, and soon, only Loya was wrapped in a layer, and the rest became pitch black. At the same time, a terrifying shock swept through the entire space. Loya couldn't tell what was going on here, but as far as he could see, the entire space began to tremble wildly. The darkness is collapsing, the light is disappearing, and nothing can remain intact in this horrific shock. The vibration was transmitted so fast, it was just a breath of time, and it was transmitted from a distance and touched him. Then, Loya was frozen and fell into the purple crack that appeared at the same time behind him. But even though he couldn't move, he still tried his best to make a final cry. What is the reason for his meowing? That place began to reorganize, and we were squeezed out. Edith is still very calm, and now as long as she enters the time-space tunnel, it is her home court. You should thank me, Loya, or you will be directly decomposed into the most basic particles in the universe with the reorganization. Oh, then I really thank you. Loya rolled the eyes of the dead fish and thought so. Then, in the next second, a dazzling white light invaded his vision, making him unable to see anything clearly. But at this last moment, he saw in a trance, on the edge of the purple crack, a huge golden vertical pupil exuding a terrifying aura aimed at the crack channel, watching him leave. Is this the irresistible existence that Edith spoke of? Loya only felt that his breathing was stagnant, and then he lost consciousness. The naval headquarters, the courtyard where Loa lives. Hold the grass. A lingering cold air instantly appeared, freezing the entire courtyard. Unconsciously spitting out ice crystals in his mouth, Loya burst out dragon scales, and one of them jumped up into the sky. I'm scared to death. What the hell is that? Looking at the familiar environment around him, Loya gasped in surprise. With just one glance, the terrifying breath of ultimate made him clearly feel death. This was the feeling that Akainu couldn't give him when he was fighting against Lucci. If I had to find a comparison, it would be the difference between the threat to life that people feel when faced with a pistol and the difference they feel when faced with an atomic bomb. More than just the gap between heaven and earth. But luckily it's back. Looking at the bright sunshine on his head, Loya, who broke his pajamas, stretched a lot. What a beautiful weather. Loya. Suddenly, Loya, who was frightened by a violent drink, trembled all over. He turned his head in confusion, and saw a familiar frog's head sticking out of a window on the upper level of the fortress. Yo, Marshal Sengoku, good morning. What a shit. Sengoku took a deep breath. What are you doing now? Don't you feel uncomfortable for a day without causing trouble? Cause trouble. Luoya repeated these two words in a daze, and suddenly lowered his head as if he had felt it. Then he patted his head and smiled awkwardly. What? I said I didn't mean it. Do you believe it? I believe you are a big bastard. Boom. The huge golden version of Sengoku directly broke through the room on the 21st floor of the fortress, spent half of his body, pointed his right hand at Loya, and began to condense the light. Buddha's impact. Bang. Loya in midair was instantly knocked away, and he didn't know where to go, leaving only a sentence in the air. The 21st floor is SB. Quote. After solving a certain troublemaker, Sengoku cancelled the fruit deformation, and then waved his hand and commanded, "You guys, hurry up and find General Akainu, and let him go down and save people together." Ah, yes. Yigan glanced at the direction Loya flew out of without a word, and trotted away. Sengoku said was not to save Loya, but to save the soldiers who were frozen before he could escape when he suddenly burst out. After all, it is the resting place of the Lieutenant General. In order to prevent them from being disturbed, the patrol strength and defense strength of that area are the few key points of the headquarters. Although the strength of the lieutenant generals of the headquarters is many times higher than those of the naval soldiers on patrol, this is the treatment that they should enjoy, and has nothing to do with strength. So the moment Loya woke up, a large area was frozen, and many soldiers were frozen in place without even recovering. Just how hard and cold Loya's ice is, Sengoku is very clear. It is very unrealistic to use a chisel to break open the ice to save people. In case the hand is a little heavier, the frozen soldiers will crack directly. Just want to cry without tears. That's why he asked Akainu to rush over and slowly melt the ice with magma. However, after all, this method is not very safe, so the person opposite him stood up directly and nodded to him. Then, I'll go and have a look together. After all, it's the ice dragon Loya, a little carelessness may be true. Dead man, I'm still a little sure about clearing things of a physical nature like ice cubes. Sengoku stared at the other party for a second, then shook his head. Okay, yes, it's almost time to talk. I'll inform Zephyr about the rest, and you can be ready at any time. Yes, Lord Marshal. Vegapunk stood up, put his hands in Kabuto, and walked slowly towards the door of the room. Just as he was about to open the door, Sengoku suddenly added. By the way, have you considered adding Loya's power to the robot you mentioned? His ice dragon's roaring power looks very good. That's called a pacifist, Marshal Sengoku. Vegapunk said helplessly, but I have also considered what you said. Before, I asked someone to collect the information of Lieutenant General Loya in detail on Crispia Island. The conclusion was, no. Quote. Ah, that's such a pity. Sengoku smacked his lips, as if it wasn't surprising that the other party could collect Loya's information on Crispia Island without telling himself. But compared with Lieutenant General Loya, we still have a better choice. Vegapunk turned around and took out a bottle of blood from Kabuto. This is the blood of General Yellow Ape, with mine in my opinion, compared to Lieutenant General Loya's roar. The laser of General Kizaru is much less difficult to operate and difficult to manufacture, and its power is not weak. So I decided to add the power of General Kizaru to the pacifists first. Of course, maybe in the future, I will consider the issue you mentioned. I see, it's really hard for you. Sengoku nodded and said calmly. Pushing open the door, Vegapunk put Kyabu's blood back into Kabuto again, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Lieutenant General Loya, are you really a devil fruit person? Chapter 231 Locked Up Loya. Be gentle, it hurts. Dr. Oliver is applying medicine to Loya lying on the hospital bed. Every time his hand touches Loya's wound, the other party will make a scream like a pig. So how many times have I said that although I have a strong recovery ability, I am a dragon slayer, not a Deadpool? Do you dare to lighten up? Behind that rib is the heart. Still beating heart, are you a cat? When you see something that moves, you want to scratch your paw. Snapped. Dr. Oliver slapped the tape, letting it stick to the muscle and straightening the bandage. This action made Loya tremble uncontrollably. It wasn't painful, it was purely frightening. Okay, stop howling. Dr. Oliver clapped his hands and said to Loya while taking off the glove organizer, isn't it just a few broken bones? With your current resilience, you don't use it for me at all. You are a pure waste of medicinal materials, you know. As a doctor with medical ethics, Oliver is not ashamed of Loya's rubbing medicine behavior. But also because of medical ethics, it is impossible for him to face the patient without helping, even if the other party is here to rub the medicine. The big deal is the confinement. How long are you going to hide with me? Hurry up and get out as far as you want. I like to be clean, old man. After cleaning up, Oliver issued an eviction order with a bad look on his face. He knew exactly why Loya came here. Not to mention anything else, the soldiers who are still running around outside the infirmary door are definitely looking for you. As soon as he said this, Loya's face immediately became bitter. 36 serious injuries and 52 minor injuries. Doctor, you are also an old member of the Navy. Do you know what level this is? The ghost knows why there are so many people around the other courtyard where he lives, and it is hard to walk there without training for a day when he has nothing to do. Loya got his wish to meet the genius scientist Vegapunk who leads the world by 500 years, but the meeting was a bit awkward. Even with Vegapunk and the dark-faced Akainu who had turned on the hardened armed color, there were still so many soldiers hospitalized for frostbite. This made Sengoku very angry and ordered Loya to be arrested and put in confinement. The flying squirrel is still clapping and celebrating. So Loya ran away. Nothing else. Shame on you. Humph, if I tell you, you should be locked up. You can cause such a big thing when you sleep. Oliver looked at Loya with disgust. Fortunately, no one died, otherwise you are naval history. A real celebrity. Killing a Navy soldier in the naval headquarters in front of Sengoku was a disaster. At that time, even if Loya is not imprisoned in the advanced city, what awaits him will definitely be deprived of the rank of lieutenant general. In a good ending, he can still mix in the position of a school-level officer, but in a bad situation, he will start from the direct miscellaneous soldier. At that time, as Dr. Oliver said, he became famous. The only one in the history of the Navy who challenged the 10th prison battle and was promoted to the 17th Vice Admiral Loya was dismissed from his rank in less than half a year. What a grass-holding situation this is. Loya was about to answer something when suddenly, his back froze, and he turned to look at the window with a confused look. There, a big face stuck to it, grinning wickedly at him. It turns out that you are hiding here, Loya. Come back to the confinement with me. Loya. Speaking of flying squirrel, this is the 3rd floor. What firm belief do you have to support you, and make you use your huge monthly steps to find me in the headquarters? Loya was about to complain about something when suddenly an ice Jinchuriki column broke into the door, and with a smashing sound, it slammed straight into Loya. Frozen time capsule. Hey, there are innocent onlookers here. Oliver screamed strangely, and one fell down and escaped the attack. But he ducked, and Loya, who was stunned by his blocking his sight, was not so lucky. Kuzan's ice climbed directly onto his body, freezing him in place with the hospital bed. Boom! Kuzan pushed open the broken door of the infirmary and walked in. Kuzan yawned and said, "Ah Lala, you're hiding here. Come with me, Loya." Saying that, he is about to reach out and grab it. But just as he approached Loya, the dazzling blue light instantly filled his sight. Hum! The magic vibrated, and the cold was overflowing. "Mr. Kuzan, have you forgotten that your freezing has no effect on me?" The frost fist of the ice dragon. Crack! Bang! Roha, who was frozen into an ice sculpture, broke through the ice layer on his body and shot out like a cannonball, and a heavy fist rushed towards Kuzan's head. Cut! At this moment of crisis, Kuzan slammed angrily, then was hit in the left face by Loya's fist and flew back upside down. After eliminating Kuzan, Loya instantly transformed himself into a dragon, stepped on the ground, stepped on the floor of the infirmary, and then used this force to hit the flying squirrel outside the window. Hold the grass! Before the flying squirrel could react, Loya, who had smashed the window, stepped on his face. Then, before Loya had time to mock the flying squirrel, various senses of danger flooded into his heart. He looked up and was immediately taken aback. Buddha's impact. Big Spitfire. Laser. Boom! Blind Karaka. You bastards! In just an instant, Loya in midair was knocked down by the light and fire dual attribute shockwave joined by the three bosses. The huge Malenford roared under the attack of the three big bosses, protesting the recklessness of this group of violent elements. The Vice Admiral of the Navy headquarters, the Loya who has been in the limelight recently, has been locked up. For 3 months, no one was allowed to visit the prison. This is probably the most talked about thing in the sea recently, and even the supernova, Fire Fist, Ace in the Sea was robbed of the limelight by him. At first, not many people believed this ridiculous news. What do you say? Shut down. The Lieutenant General of the dignified naval headquarters will be locked up. Are you sure you're not kidding me? However, as the news became more and more intense, and there was no news of witnessing that guy recently, the people who were skeptical at first finally believed it. They can only sigh with emotion. Social society. However, mainly the people who were deceived by the officials when Loya broke through the Third Order, came to the Navy headquarters as soon as the news appeared, strongly protesting Sengoku's atrocities. They have always believed that Loya must have been unfairly treated for causing damage in the headquarters. As a helpless, civilian-born navy, this kind of thing is not uncommon in the sea. If Loya could know the news, he would probably feel very at ease, right? However, at the moment, Loya naturally didn't know the news, because he was busy practicing now. Loya now knows why in many TV movies, the prisoners in the prison love to exercise. It's purely because of idleness. Just like himself, on the third day of making soldiers out of ice to fight at home, he began to get bored. So, after thinking about it, he felt that it was better to practice to pass the time. Chapter 232 New Year's Day. Now Loya's attribute panel can't be called at all. After Edith clearly told him the cause and effect of the skill panel transformation, he simply cancelled this function. For Loya, this is not a bad thing, so he has no opinion on it. From the very beginning, with the blessing of the system, Loya seemed to be playing a game. Unleashing a skill has nothing to do with his own will, just like clicking the skill icon in the game, the damage caused is as much as it is, and the same is true for the mana consumed. After he broke through the Third Order, this situation changed greatly. At that time, his skills were no longer simply released, but more like accumulating power, and he could freely control the strength and consumption. Ice control is a skill born in this situation, and it is also the proof that his strength level is recognized by Edith. However, neither of the above two situations can be compared with him now. After Edith cleared the source code of the system. No, after clearing the system, Loya finally felt the power of magic. That is something completely different from domineering. He can now clearly feel the flow of every trace of magic in his body, Where did they go? Why did they disappear? How did they form? These situations that Loya had never experienced before, can be clearly felt at this moment. Without the system assistance, it is indeed a big loss for Loya, but it is the price in exchange for the current control. This kind of freedom is unrestrained, without any feeling of restraint. Loya is 100% willing. Therefore, the current Loya practice is no longer a single skill that has no choice but to strengthen, just like the ice modeling magic. Instead, you can improve your ability from the basics, so that you can get a comprehensive improvement. For example, what he is doing now is to disperse and reorganize the magic power, and integrate it into the power of the dragon. This is a dangerous process. Even if the power of the dragon and the magic power of killing dragons have the same root and the same origin, the former is the support of the latter, but there is still the possibility of runaway. And the power of the dragon runs rampant, and the result is loss of reason and complete dragon transformation. However, the benefits are also obvious. The power and strength of the dragon-killing magic combined with the power of the dragon cannot be compared with the magic used under the same consumption. It is worth mentioning that even though the system is completely clear, Edith still retains the only two attributes for him, so that he can clearly observe the situation of dragon power and prevent the occurrence of rampage. One of these two retained attributes is the power of the dragon. The other is the body of a dragon. When the awakening level of the dragon's power reaches 30%, his body will irreversibly transform into a dragon, which is a characteristic that Edith cannot change. Therefore, he needs to observe the value of dragon power at all times and be fully prepared. As for what to prepare by then, he didn't know either. In addition, the value of the dragon's body allows Loya to know the level of his current body most intuitively, which is also an indispensable convenient attribute. Leaving the assistance of the system does not mean that Loya has no way to obtain these data, but having these data saves a lot of trouble for him. Their status is similar to the combat tester in Dragon Ball, and it is better than nothing. Spring and autumn come, and everything withers. A fart. In practice, time flies by quickly. A month later, Loya in prison opened the attribute column that Edith left him, looked at the two attributes above, and showed a satisfied smile. Now, the values of dragon body and dragon power are as follows. Dragon power. 31/100%. Dragon power can increase the strength of Dragon Slayer's Dragon Slayer magic, but more than 30% of his body begins to transform, and after 90%, Dragon Slayer's body begins to transform into a dragon. Dragon's body. 50/100%. The body gradually adapts to the degree of the dragon's power, and improves the all-round quality of the dragon-killing magician. The degree of adaptation can be temporarily improved by swallowing energy, and the sequelae are relatively large. Yes, Loya's dragon power has officially broken through 31%. That's why he didn't know what to prepare. Apart from a few extra circles of tattoos that could not be removed, there was no change in his appearance at all. I wanted to ask Edith, but the other party disappeared again since he came back with him a month ago, and he couldn't communicate with him. Maybe it's because it has just reached 30%, so the characteristics are not obvious yet. Loya had to comfort herself like this. In addition to the big step improvement of the dragon's power, the level of the dragon's body has finally reached a terrifying 50%. This is the result of Loya's hard work during this period of time. 50% of the dragon's body makes the current Loya extremely confident. Because even this kind of hard Halu stone prison, he can crush it. Of course, this is something that can only be done by him in the form of Jackie Chan after the pseudo-dragon transformation. But this is enough to show how terrifying Loya's current power is. That is a seafloor stone, the hardness of which is comparable to that of diamonds. I'm invincible, ha 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 ha. At the bottom of the empty fortress prison, rampant laughter echoed constantly. The bat in the dark place was frightened and fell from the ceiling, smashing on the ground and crawling around in a circle. At this moment, a familiar voice interrupted Loya's laughter. Alas, someone is invincible. Then should we come out and try to fight? Hearing this familiar catchphrase, Loya, who was laughing, immediately closed his voice. Hee, Mr. Kuzan. I'll just talk about it. If I really want to fight Kuzan, Loya can only say half a pound at most. And he is half a catty, and Kuzan is 8 tails. This is still cheap in attributes. If he were to fight with Kizaru and Akainu, it would definitely be a difference between half a catty and a catty. Edith used the skill icon to show him the direction of cultivation before eliminating the system, and he is now working hard to complete that skill. As long as it is successful, with the increase in the practice during this period of time, it is not impossible to hang and beat the 3 generals. Of course, if the other party joins forces, and if they don't both release water like in the war, Loya is courting death. Hearing Loya's clothes soften, Kuzan said expressionlessly, "Okay, don't play tricks. I brought you something to eat today, and by the way, I will come to see you on behalf of Teacher Zepha and the rest." Look at me. Loya blinked his eyes blankly. No, Mr. Kuzan, isn't the order given by Marshal Sengoku forbidding anyone to visit the prison? Are you abusing your power? Do you think I'm just as foolish as you? Loya's response that he hadn't become depressed during his long incarceration made Kuzan a little relieved. Hearing Loya's words, he grinned and said, "After all, today is the Chinese New Year, and Marshal Sengoku specially asked me to bring you something delicious. Come, I also brought you a little wine, enough for you to have a good time." Saying that, Kuzan was about to take down the mountain-high food from the trailer behind him. Wait a minute, Loya suddenly interrupted Kuzan's movements. He raised his hand and asked, "Today, is it the New Year's Day?" The world of One Piece naturally has a New Year's Eve. However, it is not the kind of Chinese Spring Festival that Loya is familiar with, nor is it Western Christmas. The most grand and only New Year's festival here every year, the special one is the first day of each year. That is January 1st. Because it is only once a year, and it is not like the Washa before crossing, you can have a Christmas, a New Year's Day, a New Year's Eve and a New Year's Eve. So on this day, generally speaking, not all prisoners whose crimes are too serious can get time to go out to rest. But what's the situation now? Kuzan gave himself food. Co-author is still some heinous and vicious criminal who can't go out even during the New Year's Eve. This makes Loya very uncomfortable. Chapter 233 New Year's Escape. I was not allowed to go out even during the New Year's Eve. Marshal Sengoku is determined to lock me up for 3 months this time. Loya is very upset about this, very upset. At this moment, as if he noticed something, Kuzan raised his head and squinted at Loya. Are you making some crooked ideas? Absolutely not. Loya shook his head like a rattle. Oh, is it? Kuzan looked at him suspiciously, as if trying to see through him. However, as an old fritter, Loya is very familiar with such things as acting, so he will never let Kuzan see doubts. After staring at Loya for a few seconds, Kuzan nodded and said, "That's good. If you dare to cause any trouble today, I estimate that your confinement time will be increased by half a year." After all, quote, today is the New Year's Day. A cold light flashed in Kuzan's eyes, which was a precursor to the natural frozen fruit ability, Admiral Iokiji, who began to use the fruit ability. People are not made of iron. At the end of the year, there is always a need for a good rest. Whether it's the Navy, pirates or civilians, it's the same. Put on your gloves and bring the food in through the small door in the center of the stone railing of the sea tower. Marshal Sengoku is also afraid that you will go out and cause trouble on this day, so let me bring you these food. Click. After carrying it, Kuzan, wearing gloves, rebuttoned the large lock made of Halu stone, and then took out a key and a flame spray gun from Kabuto, which is the kind of precious metal that jewelry stores make. Fortunately, Marshal Sengoku had the foresight and let me prepare this. Because you are an ice-type ability like me, and it is easier to pick the door and lock it. Chap. The key was inserted into the lock, and Kuzan flicked the switch on the gun with his thumb, causing it to shoot a burst of blue flames. Then, while Loya's face was stunned, Kuzan calmly melted the key into the lock with a spray gun. Looking at the key that was completely integrated with the lock, Kuzan nodded with satisfaction. In this way, your kid won't be able to escape, right? Gollum. Loya swallowed his saliva and asked with a twitching mouth, Mr. Kuzan, what do you mean? What do you mean? Kuzan raised his head amusingly. You said you wouldn't come out. Do you think I would believe it? You bastard. Is my character so untrustworthy? Bullshit. Kuzan restocked his spray gun, put one hand in his kabuto pants, and turned to leave. Let's go, just stay here, Loya. Watching Kuzan walk away all the way, Loya picked up the wooden barrel and took a gulp of wine. Che, they're all bastards, shameless. Loya muttered in dissatisfaction, and then looked up at the prison, which was not very wide, only 5 meters square. The floor, ceiling, walls and railings are all made of halu stone. Yes, it's a luxury. However, Mr. Kuzan, do you think you can lock me in this way? A wicked smile appeared on the corner of Loya's mouth. Who told you that I am a devil fruit person? Halu stone is the true nemesis of all capable people, not only making them powerless, but also temporarily turning them into ordinary people. It doesn't matter if it's a natural type, a superhuman type, or an animal type, so Ace needs to wear Shanghai Lushi handcuffs for execution. In such a prison, if Loya is really a devil fruit person, then he is really numb. Unfortunately, he is not. Looking at the lock cylinder that was burned and melted together by Kuzan, Loya ate the chicken legs calmly. Humph, I'm not allowed to go out, then I'll go out today. Passing through the long dark corridor, there was finally a ray of light ahead. Kuzan pushed open the iron gate at the end of the passage, and came to the 2 old men in the salute of the soldiers on both sides. Marshal Sengoku, Mr. Garp. Seeing Kuzan come out, there is no small tail dragging behind him. Sengoku, who had been waiting here for a long time, was obviously relieved. He patted Kuzan on the shoulder and said, Thank you, Kuzan. It's okay, since the task is completed, then I'll go home and go to sleep. As he spoke, Kuzan was about to leave. However, Karp stepped forward and climbed onto his neck and asked with a smile, By the way, Kuzan, do you use the things I gave you? You know that this bastard Loya is also an ice attribute. It's easy to make a key out of ice to open the door. Oh yes, I almost forgot. Kuzan was stunned, then took out the spray gun and the remaining key from Kabuto and handed it to Garp. Then he said to Sengoku next to him, It's true that the lock cylinder was melted by me, but Loya didn't wear the Shanghai stone lock after all. I'm worried that he will break the door violently. Ha ha ha, that's the entire prison made of halu stone. There is only one in the Navy headquarters. Before Kuzan could finish speaking, Garp interrupted Kuzan with a loud laugh. Don't say it's Toroya. Whitebeard is locked inside and won't be able to come out for a while. Thinking of today's New Year's Day, Loya had to live in prison in grief, and Kapuna's heart was as sweet as honey. HMPH, Ace was hurt by you when he went out to sea. Seeing you have a hard time makes me happy. Probably, there is such an idea in it. However, unlike Karp's brainless optimism, after listening to Kuzan's words, Sengoku raised his chin carefully. Indeed, what you said is also a problem. Sengoku wouldn't naively think that if the lock was fused into a ball, that little bastard couldn't get out. Let's go and send the soldiers who are responsible for staying in the square today to watch. They don't need to stop Loya from escaping, they just need to inform him of the news as soon as he escapes. Anyway, the headquarters is so big, if he really dares to come out. Speaking of this, Sengoku said with a smile, I think he is itchy again. So, why do you always listen to Mr. Garp, Marshal Sengoku? Kuzan sighed helplessly. On a day like the New Year's Day, it stands to reason that it will be good to release Loya directly. Why do you have to do it? Well, I will inform you. But this was Sengoku's order, and Kuzan had no choice but to nod his head in agreement. I'll go back to sleep after the notification, you guys can play slowly. Goodbye. With one hand in his pants kabuto, Kuzan waved his hand, leaving a handsome back to the 2 old men. As for what will happen after that, Kuzan said, "Who care? Anyway, he lives in a remote enough location, you just demolish the fortress." I turned over and continued to sleep. Just as the three bosses on the ground were discussing about Loya, our protagonist, Loya, had already completed his magic. He used his left hand to lift his right hand, looking rather labored. At this moment, his right hand has completely turned into a large piece of ice. Just like when Kuzan used his fruit ability, it was crystal clear and beautiful. But he is not a fruit power person, but a magician. Therefore, the right hand in this form is definitely not comparable to Kuzan firing ice cubes. Looking at the sturdy Halu stone railings in front of him, Loya warned himself in a low voice. "Be light, fast, and quiet." Then, he moved the ice-shaped right hand to the seafloor stone railing and placed it. Next moment. Boom. Chapter 234 The poisonous milk is here. Boom. The shock was so obvious that even if it came from the bottom layer of the prison dozens of meters above the ground, Sengoku and Garp still clearly felt the roar from the ground. "What the hell are you guys doing? I'm really going to strike, do you believe it?" "Hey, Garp, what did you say?" Sengoku wanted to be quiet at the moment, smoking a cigar in silence. Although as a general, he has always disliked smoking, but at this moment he is really tired and wants to smoke a cigarette to calm down. In this regard, Garp was also silent, silently squatting in the corner to reflect on his life. Monkey D. Poisonous Milk Garp once again proved himself with facts. The shot came, and the whole prison suddenly became noisy, and a large group of naval soldiers who stayed behind ran around to check the situation. "You guys, hurry down and have a look." The rest of the captains set up defenses. "Notify Marshal Sengoku that someone has escaped." "Sengoku, notify P, I'll just stand here." And judging from the inexplicable coercion that penetrated into the air, I also know that the one who escaped from the prison should be the bastard Loyana. "I'm going to clean up this kid." Garp, who was beaten in the face, or in other words, poisoned milk, rolled up his sleeves angrily, vowed to save face, and said to Sengoku, "Bring the Halu stone lock to me, I don't believe it. This year is not over yet." In this regard, Sengoku sighed helplessly, and took out the other locks from behind. "I know there will be a time when it will be useful, give it. Since you want to go down and have a look, then I will guard it." Speaking of this, Sengoku smiled slightly. "You can be careful with Garp. Loya has been practicing in it all this time, and his strength should be stronger than before." "Che, how strong can it be in more than a month?" Garp clasped his nostrils in disdain, and a cloud of black booger popped out. Then he pinned the Halu stone lock on his waist and strode towards the door. "Is it really too hard?" Looking at the stone railings of the sea tower that exploded directly in front of him, Loya stared at his right hand speechlessly. "Come on, let's wait. This skill is indeed beyond my control at present." Following Loya's words, a strong vibration that made the chest tight suddenly sounded in the air. That was the sound of magic power flowing in his body, and the vibration caused by it was transmitted to the air. Although there was still a buzzing sound when he used magic in the past, it was the first time that it was as strong as this time. After the surging magic like a volcanic eruption subsided, the color of Loya's right hand gradually deepened, and soon, it returned to its normal appearance. At the same time, an irresistible feeling of weakness came, making him unable to stop leaning on the stone wall of Halu. Loya gasped heavily, feeling the state of his body. "The consumption of magic power is still so large, and I can't recover in half an hour. The movement just now must have attracted a lot of people. I can't rush out in my current state. After all, this is the prison of the Navy headquarters. Although the defense force is not as strong as the advanced city, 1 or 2 lieutenant generals can still find it. Moreover, because this is where he is being held, once the news is notified, then Sengoku and others will definitely come quickly, and now rushing out is the real announcement of GG. It seems that I can only use that trick." Luo Ya's eyes narrowed, and the ice armor on his body extended out with lines of ice as thin as hair. These ice lines extended out, and quickly climbed up to pieces of gravel, and then stuck to it, freezing the gravel. Then the ice line pulled the rubble back gradually, repairing the broken walls and railings, and freezing them from each other from the fault. This is an extremely delicate job. If there are still systematic restrictions as before, even if Loya can remember the location of every piece of gravel, it will never be possible to complete the repair work in a short period of time. But now it is different, there is no system restriction, Loya can focus more on the fine magic control. Soon, the broken railings and walls were repaired, and Loya looked at the restored prison and nodded with satisfaction. If you don't take a closer look at observation hockey, you can't tell that these places have broken. The cracks above can hide the movement I just caused. After all, the movement just now was a bit too big. It would be a joke if the Halu stone railings were still intact after that level of attack. Just because diamonds are hard, doesn't mean they are indestructible. At this time, Loya's share of death power from the ice dragon told him that a powerful enemy was approaching. This feeling is the old bastard capper. The familiar vitality told Loya that it was an acquaintance who came. Did it come so quickly? Luoya thought in a daze, but combined with the behavior of Kuzan's delivery of food just now, he suddenly realized, so it turns out, this old guy must be making trouble. The prison of the Navy headquarters is not in a prosperous area, and Kuzan would be forgiven for coming over. After all, he is still his nominal disciple. But Karp. Loya really couldn't find the reason why he was here. As for the possibility that Garp would come here later, even if Roha flew at full speed, rushed over from the headquarters fortress, and then came back to the depths of this heavily guarded underground, it would take at least 10 minutes. All the clues were connected, and Loya immediately locked the target of hatred. Not the kind of OT. Fuck, you wait for me, and I'm not finished with you when I escape. Loya thought bitterly. But now is not the time to face the other party. Luoya quickly got up, put one hand on the railing, and lay down on the ground, pretending to be a salted fish. What's with this chill? At this moment, Garp, who was going down the stairs, couldn't help shivering. However, the nervous man didn't think much, rubbed his nose, and continued to search while moving forward. Soon, the entrance to the bottom layer appeared in front of him. Since there are no people on the first few floors, the answer is obvious. Brush. Decisively wrapping armament hockey around his body, hardened a pair of fists, Garp stepped over the threshold with a look of vigilance. Then, a little confused, rubbed his eyes. It didn't even come out. With just one glance, Garp saw Loya leaning on the railing face down, and observation hockey also told him that it was indeed Loya himself. This is somewhat beyond Garp's expectations. He thought that in the attack just now, Loya should have broken out of the door. Not to mention that there are no people in the prisons above, the other party has never left the prison at all. This is simply not Loya. Chapter 235 Loya lying on the gun, the first update. Please recommend and ask for a monthly ticket for subscription. Loya. Garp whispered, waiting for Loya's response. What's the situation now? Isn't it good that you run after me and catch up with you? No, do we just fight with real people? Why did you fall before I did my best? This feeling of punching the cotton with a fist made Garp's chest feel extremely uncomfortable. But the other party was the reckless Loya after all. Looking at the cracks on the seafloor stone railings and the surrounding walls, combined with Loya's posture at the moment, Garp suddenly had a bold idea in his head. This kid, didn't he hit Halushi with his head? It's not surprising that Garp would have such an idea. He himself is Luffy's kind of out-of-tune character, and once his thoughts diverge, he is the type that can't catch up with the Huskies. Plus Sengoku told him to be careful before coming down, saying that Loya had been cultivating all this time. As a result, Garp thought that Loya must have developed a move that uses his head to attack. It's just that he wrongly estimated the hardness of the seafloor stone and the power of his own moves, and was directly stunned there. Wait a minute. Shouldn't he kill him? Thinking of this, Cap suddenly stepped forward nervously, and then heaved a sigh of relief. It's okay, I was shocked. It turned out that I was holding the Halu stone and lost my strength. Cough, garp, sir, help, help. At this moment, Loya pretended to be very weak and raised his hand to Carp. But just as his hand was raised to less than an inch, it fell down again. Seeing this scene, Carp suddenly felt very relieved, and he was very happy. Tisk tisk, devil fruit ability. Cap, who was relaxed, took shy steps and came to Loya to pick his booger with a trembling step. Loya, your situation of being restrained by Halushi is not much worse than your symptoms of seasickness. Do you really have the strength of a lieutenant general? The seafloor stone is indeed the biggest nemesis of the ability user, but as the strength of the ability user increases, this restraint effect can be partially offset. Of course, the fruit ability is not to be used, but it is still possible to maintain normal movement. It stands to reason that with Eloha's current strength, even if half of his body is attached to the seafloor stone, he should have the strength to hold it open. Loya suddenly remembered this at this moment, a little dumbfounded. However, the script had already been arranged, and opening it now would only arouse suspicion from the other party, so he had to continue acting. Fortunately, Carp is not the thoughtful type of Sengoku. As soon as he saw Roha's current appearance, he completely focused on how to mock Roha, and didn't notice it at all. This is just because I am old and experienced, and I routinely complain. After speaking, Carp didn't wait for Loya to answer, squatted down with a wretched face, and teased, "Ha ha ha, Loya, you also have today. Do you want me to help? This kind of feeling of losing strength is very uncomfortable, isn't it? I endure it." Looking at the performance of a lieutenant general in front of him, Loya secretly took a deep breath and suppressed the urge to punch him. "Ha ha ha ha, you look so funny." The more Cap said, the more he wanted to laugh. Finally, before Loya interrupted him, he couldn't help laughing exaggeratedly. "No way, my stomach hurts. Ha 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 ha." After a long time, Carp finally stopped laughing. "Tisk tisk, it's great that I'm not a fruit person." Garp took out the seafloor stone handcuffs that Sengoku gave him, and swayed in the air with one finger. "In order for us to have a good year, I can only apologize to you now." Garp smiled evilly, grabbed Roha's hand, and threw the handcuffs in his right hand, and clasped it on Roha's wrist with a click. After doing this, Carp pushed Roha away from the stone railing of the sea tower, holding his chest and looking at Roha, who fell to the ground. "It's done. This time, even if you have great skills, you can't do it, right?" Speaking, Carp stretched his waist greatly. "Really, a happy new year. I'm leaving first, you can stay honest. After the new year, I'll go out to sea to catch Ace back. Well, this day will be perfect. No, and Luffy's bastard, I have to be on guard, lest he also go out to sea and become a pirate." Watching Garp continue to walk farther and farther, like an old man who went out to buy groceries after retirement and muttered about his grandson, Loya turned over a big Byakugan. "Co-author, you are actually hating me for this matter." Thinking about the original book, Garp always believed that the culprit who let Luffy go out to sea and go on the path of pirates was Shanks. According to Ace, being a pirate may be a fate because of his bloodline. But now it's different. Loya is here, and Kapu simply threw the pot of Ace's going to sea directly to Loya. This made Loya very hurt, so he was still a scapegoat. However, Garp would hold this kind of unclear malice towards himself, and Roha could understand it. Among them, more of his worries about his grandson. Ace's identity is self-evident, the son of Roger One Piece. What a horrible identity this is. If Garp really chooses between Luffy and Ace to go to sea, he will definitely keep Ace instead of Luffy. It's not that his love for Luffy, Iron Fist, is not as good as that of Ace, nor is it that he doesn't understand the reason why a man should go out and run around. But he deeply knew the threat posed by Ace's identity and blood. As an older generation who has personally experienced Roger's generation, he knows very well what a huge and terrifying storm will be set off once Ace's identity is revealed. In this storm, his title of Navy Hero can't do anything at all. Luffy is different. This kid is not the kind of material that is wicked, so the Navy will definitely not dislike him too deeply. With his own comprehensiveness, even if he is caught, there will be no threat to his life. Of course, that's what Carp is thinking now. If he knew what his seemingly careless grandson would do in the future, this multiple-choice question would be. It's not good to say. Burning the flag of the world government, making a riot on the Judiciary Island, accepting Nico Robin, beating the Tianlong people, going to the top of the war, Dressrosa, challenging the four emperors, etc., 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 the chaos caused by Luffy, but not at all small. So Carp's malice towards Loya is more about Ace's concern, and Loya is just lying. But, no matter how you understand it, this is not the reason why Carp dumped the blame on himself. Loya raised his head and got up from the ground with a bony streak. And the problem now is that they won't let me out during the Chinese New Year. Ertanongang, you have a problem, a big deal. Looking at the Heilushi handcuffs in his hands, Loya's forehead immediately turned pitch black, and strips of blue lightning shuttled through the darkness, as if to tear them apart. Armed color, hardened. Then, the magic power shook, and a sharp ice-made horn appeared on his forehead. The black-blue armament hockey climbed up and dyed the horn black, revealing a trace of killing intent in Ling Lai. Raising his hand and aligning the horn with the handcuffs on his hand, Loya snorted lightly. Ice Dragon's Collision. And then, bang! Chapter 236 Ice Golem and Ice Shadow Illusion, 2nd. Bang! The blue-black collision angle hit the handcuffs, and a large amount of sparks splashed out in an instant. Then, the hard sea tower stone lock cracked. Under the 50% increase of the dragon's body, Loya directly broke the handcuffs with the most violent and arrogant posture. Click. Pulling off the remaining sea tower stone stuck in his hand, Loya rubbed his wrist that became a little sour from the impact, looked at the ceiling above his head, and showed a strange smile. Now, it's time to get out and do it. Back on the ground, Garp made the soldiers stop their hectic pace with an indifferent expression. Because the culprit that caused the shock has already been dealt with by him, everyone can go home for the Chinese New Year. Since Garp spoke, what else could these Navy soldiers say about this? And after saluting, they dispersed according to the order. Seeing Carp come out, Sengoku stepped forward and asked, "Cap, how's the situation?" "Of course it's fine." Carp gave Sengoku a confident smile and pointed to his empty waist. "I handcuffed Heilushi to that kid with my own hands." That's it, then I'm relieved." Sengoku breathed a sigh of relief. The fruit person was chained by the Heilu stone lock, so he was an ordinary person. Whether it is the fruit ability or the sixth form, it is impossible for Loya to use it again. If such a Loya is locked in the Heilushi prison, which is as hard as a diamond, he will never get out. However, you still need to be careful. Thinking of this, Sengoku clapped his hands and said to the soldiers who turned their heads, "Okay. Everyone, the problem has been solved. But to be safe, you still work as a team and take turns to guard the locked prison in Loya. To prevent him from escaping, understand?" It was the one who did it. A group of Navy soldiers thought so, and then stood at attention and saluted. "Yes, Marshal." After doing this, Sengoku and Garp slowly paced back to the fortress. Today is the New Year's Day. Although the evening is the time to start the banquet, there is still a lot of preparation work to be done before. Watching the two big bosses leave, the Navy quickly divided into dozens of teams under the arrangement of the officer, and went to Loya's position to guard him in turn. In fact, they knew very well that Sengoku didn't really want them to stop Loya from escaping. With Eloha's current strength, he is not afraid of anyone except for a few general-level existences, and it is naturally impossible for these soldiers to stop him. So their main role is to be a messenger. A large number of footsteps came from above, heading towards the bottom of the prison. Loya felt the breath of the person coming, and nodded clearly. Be careful, Marshal Sengoku. Unfortunately, you guys are slow. After confirming that Garp had left, Loya got out of the prison. Now he has left the prison where he was imprisoned, and is about to leave here. Feeling the attitude of the person coming, Loya stood in the corridor and let the ice armor form a mirror-like ice layer in front of him. Ice shadow illusion. In an instant, the ice that was wrapped in front of Loya began to twist and deform constantly, allowing the light to be refracted and reflected on it. After completing the move, a large group of Navy soldiers with guns ran past Loya, completely unaware that their target was standing here. This trick is basically useless for guys who know observation hockey. After all, just using the refraction of light to make himself transparent does not make Loya's entire body disappear. If your opponent can observation hockey, you can easily find the difference. However, it is enough to use this trick to deal with these ordinary soldiers now. Waiting for the soldiers with guns to run over, Loya stuck his head out from behind the ice and grinned in the direction they left. Come on, dear, it'll see how long you can help me hold on. Afterwards, the ice armor was restored, and Loya crept to the upper level of the prison. On the other side, they came to the bottom of the prison and saw the intact sea tower stone railings from a distance. The soldiers were also relieved. It's okay, Lord Loya is still there. Yeah, if you turn around and run away, Lord Garp will be angry. Okay, stop talking. The squad leader interrupted the conversation of the soldiers and ordered, you guys, guard the left side. You, guard the right side. The rest of the people sit with me in the middle, and there can't be any blind spots in sight. Understand? Yes. After waiting for his subordinates to disperse, the Lieutenant Navy rubbed his hands and said flatteringly to the figure lying in the prison, that, Lord Loya. If you want to eat or drink, tell your subordinates. I will bring it to you. Quote. Don't be such a jerk, let's have a face, shall we? The rest of the soldiers screamed at Kiba. However, this is also the lieutenant's helpless move. Let them guard Loya, a lieutenant general of the headquarters. This is a very dangerous thing. In case Loya is a small-bellied person, it is not easy to wear small shoes for them after going out. So it is absolutely beneficial and harmless to please the other party now. In response to the lieutenant's question, in the prison, Loya, no mistake, who was lying on the wooden bed, opened his closed eyes slightly, glanced at him, turned over, and continued to sleep. I don't know if I understood something from that look. The lieutenant smiled shyly. Okay, Lord Loya. You sleep slowly, and your subordinates will not disturb you. After he finished speaking, he stepped back and sat on the ground, and ordered in a serious low voice. Everything is quiet, Lord Loya is going to sleep now. Yes. The sound is neat, but as fine as a mosquito. I remember that the top is the last floor. Loya stuck to the top of the passage, avoiding a group of patrolling soldiers. The gate of the prison must have been closed, and there will be heavy guards. The ice shadow illusion can indeed make people not find him, but the light shift caused by the movement is beyond his control, so it is not realistic to want to stealth and rush out. Hurry up, there are too many loopholes in the ice puppet, and it won't last long. In addition to being able to imitate the appearance, Loya's ice puppet not only can't use his own skills like the young master's shadow cavalry, but also can't speak. And because he couldn't control it, making him no different from a real person, Loya only left a stress response to the puppet. That's how many decibels the sound goes over. It turns around, takes a look, and turns back. I can hide it once or twice, but the number of times is too many, and the movements have been so rigid and repeated that anyone can find the abnormality. So, by the way, I remember that there is a layer of offices on the ground. It is leaning on the wasteland and should be able to rush out from there. Loya made up his mind and walked up quickly. Chapter 237 A Chance Encounter with Mattis III. Near the gate of the prison, Loya stopped. Sure enough, the door is closed. Looking at the large group of soldiers patrolling over there, Loya pouted. It's really hard to be a navy without a holiday during the Chinese New Year. But he didn't plan to leave from here, so Loya looked around and quickly drilled in the direction with the weakest defense. This is the road to the warden's office on the second floor. Usually, a lieutenant general is stationed here. Because the other party is a hawk from Akainu's side, Loya and his friendship are not very good, so once they are discovered, the battle will be inevitably. Although Loya's methods are not as soft as Kuzan's, he has always been known for his decisiveness in dealing with pirates. But because he trained under Kuzan, and he has always called Kuzan a teacher, unilaterally, everyone basically regarded him as a member of the Kuzan family. Even among colleagues, the hawks and doves in the navy still dislike each other, so he must be careful, touch it slowly, and then leave from the window facing the wasteland. The plan is very good. With the power of death to perceive the breath of life, Loya can often find the enemy one step ahead of the other party. However, there are always some things that will exceed Loya's expectations. Just like now. Really, handsome debut. Ah. This sound went from far to near, and it was outside the perception range of Loya at first, but as the sound approached, a figure smashed the window, jumped into the corridor, and landed in front of Loya. Then, the two sides froze in place. Mattis Lan, Loya whispered the name, looking dangerously from side to side on the muscular brother in front of him. Ah, Loya Zhang, ooh. Major General Mattis was about to salute him, but in the next second he was rushed over by Loya, covering his mouth to prevent him from speaking. Shish, keep your voice down. Loya raised his index finger, then he looked left and right, made sure no one was there, and asked, "How did you come here?" That, Lieutenant General Loya, aren't you in confinement? Mattis suddenly remembered this matter, because the Lieutenant General in charge of this place went home for the new year, in order to ensure that someone would have someone after Loya escaped. The strength can pass the news, so he will come here to take over. Don't talk nonsense, believe it or not, I'll beat you. Loya shook his arm impatiently, as if he was about to start in the next second. In this regard, Mattis couldn't help but think of the scene when Loya graduated as a prison guard, and his muscles bulged. Yes, I'm here to replace Lieutenant General Seaver and be in charge of the headquarters prison today. In other words, are you the biggest here today? Hearing Mattis' words, Loya narrowed his eyes. In other words, are you the strongest here today? For some reason, Major General Mattis suddenly had an ominous feeling in his heart. The next moment, he knew he had guessed right. Swish. An ice blade was held by Loya against his neck, and at the same time Loya's other hand began to condense cold enough to freeze people to death. Then you say, I want to leave now, do you want to inform Marshal Sengoku? Huh. Feeling the familiar chill, Major General Mattis was really about to cry. You said that I was just here to take a class, why would I encounter such a thing? But if you say, yes, now, you'll be beaten up. No, you will definitely get shit. Thinking of this, for the sake of his own personal safety, Mattis said with a firm face and righteous words, I didn't see anything, but the 1010 is really good today. Ha ha ha, handsome and handsome. Saying that, he ignored Loya like a blind man and walked towards the office generously. Loya looked at Mattis walking towards the office with a bewildered expression. Unexpectedly, the muscle brother Gwei Mattis is still in acting school. But then he took out the phone bug and added, very good, I recorded this sentence. You know how to do it, right? Gollum. Mattis turned his back to Loya, and swallowed a saliva with a pale face. It's so insidious. At this moment, there was a loud noise from downstairs. It was a naval soldier who heard the sound of breaking and came up to check the situation. Loya smiled at Mattis and got out of his smashed window. Feeling that Loya's breath was getting farther and farther, Mattis' face was blue and white, and he frowned and said, really, not handsome at all. Ah, the free air is so fresh. Standing on the edge of the cliff, Loya stretched hard, breathing the fresh air greedily. But immediately, he turned his eyes to the direction of the headquarters fortress, looked at the two huge Chinese characters on it, and smiled dangerously. Humph, do you want to rest during the new year? Did you ask me? Navy Headquarters, Elite Camp Courtyard. Aludo, come and help me see if this is hanging crookedly. Simon had already gone home, so those who stayed in the courtyard were all people who could not go home, or were homeless. Therefore, it is Mindy's turn to hang the ribbon on a 20-meter-high bamboo pole. Look, you want me to look at it this way. Aludo put on a rough work uniform and walked past Ming with a huge pot of sewage. I'm only 4 meters tall, what do you think? Do you still miss me? Let you go up. Don't bother me, too busy. Today is Chinese New Year, and we need to clean up. Since he was busy with his work early in the morning, Aludo has long been a little impatient. You know how painful it is to have a 4-meter-tall guy mop the floor. I almost can't squat down. But there is no way. Who told him that the 3-year term in the elite camp will soon be completed? This is the rule set by Teacher Zepha. In the last New Year, the veterans have to undertake the heaviest, most tiring and dirty work. Unlike Aludo, as a recruit who only joined this year and the only remaining women in the recruit camp, Minnie was very leisurely at the moment. But even at leisure, she was not very happy. Sitting on the stone stool, Minnie sighed softly while packing the candy into the folded colored cardboard boxes. Hey, it's so boring, there are so many people here. Hearing Minnie's words, the faces of the busy people turned dark. Yes, there are a lot of people missing. In previous years, the picture of Hansa standing in the corridor with a sword and pointing like an uncle was gone. There was no one chattering at them anymore, and the ears were cleansed a lot all of a sudden. There are also Loya and Tony who joined this year. Although the latter claimed to be missing, they knew very well inside that Tony was now staying in the new world to familiarize himself with the power of the Titans. Then, there is Loya. As an orphan, Loya's private prosecution, it stands to reason that even after graduation, he should return to the courtyard to celebrate the new year. But who told him to like to die so much? He was locked up, and he was not allowed to come out during the festival. Except for General Aokiji, who came to inform them that he went to see Loya, they didn't even know what Loya had been in there. Look at this year. As the saying goes, the most important thing for a family is to be neat and tidy. Chapter 238 Sunny turns to blizzard, 4th more. Just when everyone felt a little sad, a cold wind suddenly blew in the courtyard. The sudden cold wind whizzed past, quickly freezing half of the courtyard. The streamer that stretched out and fluttered in the wind was frozen in place before it fell down due to the weight of the ice crystals, hanging on the bamboo pole like dried salted fish. However, even though a thick layer of ice crystals had formed in the courtyard, the elite battalion members in the courtyard were not injured at all, showing the master's strong control over freezing. Except that the surrounding environment becomes colder, it has no effect on them. Looking down at the icy sewage in the basin, Aldo blinked, and suddenly exclaimed in surprise, Loya. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect it, I'm back again. With the familiar laughter, Loya jumped off the roof and fell into the middle of the courtyard. Facing the familiar faces around him, Loya grinned and tapped his right hand on his forehead. Yo, everyone, how have you been recently? Dong 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 dong. Aludo ran over like a bear, and pounced with his big furry hands. Loya. I miss you to death. And then, bang. The stained Aludo flew out in response, and was spun in the air into the frozen artificial lake. After finishing Aldo, Loya nodded to his companions again. Are you preparing for the evening banquet now? I'll help too. Clap clap. That's great. Ming rolled the eyes of the dead fish and applauded, and then tapped the frozen streamer like dried salted fish. But can you help me thaw this first? I'll be responsible for hanging the streamer of Loya. PFF'd. Minnie covered her mouth and laughed softly, and then the laughter grew louder and gradually infected the rest of the people. For a time, the entire courtyard was filled with laughter. On the second floor of the training room in the courtyard, Zepha sat by the window, stuck out his head, and said softly to himself, Loya. You should have escaped from prison, right? Well, forget it today, let everyone have a good new year. Quote. After he finished speaking, he looked at his ugly severed limb. Even if the hideous scar on it healed, it would make the person watching it feel bone-piercing pain. Hey, after the new year, it's time to install the crusher. Before Loa was locked up, Sengoku informed him that Vegapunk had completed the construction of the shredder and was in the final stages of commissioning. Judging from the original work, Zephahui will not install the crusher until 70 years old, that is, in 1518 of the Haiyuan calendar 2 years later. But this machine is not something that Vegapunk wants to build. In order to allow the aging Zepha to continue to fight monsters of the same level, the research and development of the shredder is undoubtedly very slow. Not to mention the fact that the Kunken bear, one of the 7 Wuhei under the king, joined Vegapunk's plan, making him more distracted from researching pacifists. The arrival of Loya undoubtedly made Zepha make a choice earlier. Loya had guessed before that the reason why Zepha installed the shredder in 1518 was very likely because the recent recruits were too weak. I can't worry about it, so I just waited until then to leave. And the appearance of Loya made him, a teacher, finally relieved, and made this choice a year in advance. Looking at the noisy young man below, Zepha silently took out a cigar, lit it with a match, and took a heavy breath. Sure enough, if you use a match, the taste will become more mellow. The afternoon sun gently sprinkled on the wrinkles on the old man's face, accompanied by the slowly rising blue smoke, looking peaceful and leisurely. Silently took out the phone bug. Sengoku hesitated for a long time, but chose to dial out. Blue blue blue. Zepha, who was taking a nap, was awakened by the sound of the phone bug. The warm sunlight had left the windowsill, and Madara shone on the attic. He put down the extinguished cigar in his hand and picked up the phone bug. Hey, do you have anything to do with me, Sengoku? Standing in the prison office, Sengoku glanced at Mattis, who was shivering beside him, and sighed. Zepha, is Loya at your place? Yeah. Zepha rubbed his eyes, looked down at the courtyard below, and then smiled. Is something wrong with me? What's the matter? I suddenly felt a pain in the liver. Sengoku was so choked up by Zepha's words that he was speechless for a while. However, Zepha's words are also showing an attitude, which makes Sengoku have to think carefully about the wording. After a long time, Sengoku said slowly, let him not cause trouble today, and it's hard to get a rest at the end of the year. Everyone is tired. Well, Zepha glanced at the sky, where the flying Loya, under the cover of ribbons and lanterns, didn't know what she was making. I'll try it, hopefully in time. Hearing Zepha's words, Sengoku looked confused. What does it mean to be hopeful? Wait a minute, shouldn't Zepha mean? Sengoku raised his head and looked at the location of the headquarters fortress, where there were a large number of floating ribbons and lanterns. At this moment, Zepha's very loud voice came from the other end of the phone. Loya. What are you doing? Get out of here. Then, Sengoku saw a figure flapping its wings and slowly flying down from the lantern. Sengoku breathed a sigh of relief and said to the phone bug, looks like I've caught up. This is it. Zepha said suddenly a little embarrassed. By the way, Sengoku, how is Tenten angry today? The weather conditions on the Great Route are chaotic, but the closer you get to the island, the more stable the weather becomes. Especially for Marineford, who is regarded as the headquarters of the Navy, the weather conditions are even predictable. The one below told me that it was sunny, so I was already preparing for the fireworks display. Before Sengoku could finish speaking, Zepha silently lit the cigar again. Come on, today is a big snowstorm in some areas. Sengoku took a deep breath. He had already guessed what Loya was going to do. Luo, yeah. The earth-shattering roar resounded throughout Marineford, which was enduring and continuous. Most of Malineford's lanterns are filled with dust like ice. Under the control of magic, these ices only need to be activated lightly, and Malineford will have a big snowstorm. However, because of Zepha's words, Loya reluctantly gave up the unfinished magic and returned to the courtyard. But, even so, enough to make a big news. While flying down slowly, Loya condensed magic power in his palm, communicating the magic mark left in each lantern. Pat. Standing on the balcony on the second floor where Zepha was, Loya smiled slightly. Teacher Zepha, I invite you to watch a good show. HMPH, you'd better think about how to end it later. Zepha snorted coldly and turned to leave decisively. Behind him, Loya asked blankly, Teacher, where are you going? Me, I'm going to find a quilt. I don't even think about the elderly. I'm prone to rheumatism and bone disease from the cold. Chapter 239 Loya's Identity. After the Chinese New Year, it is the first month. People who are not in a hurry to go to work can rest at home for a few days, enjoy the fragrance of bacon and sausages, and complete the daily tasks arranged by the 7 aunts and 8 aunts. According to the method of sliding down before Loya crossed, it is indeed true. But in this one-piece world, after the new year, what awaits everyone is the busy and peaceful daily work. Of this busy crowd, our dear Admiral Sengoku was the busiest. Because he not only has to deal with the magical top-secret documents that can be superimposed indefinitely every day, but he also has to focus on solving the medical problems of the soldiers who suffered from the snow disaster, the reconstruction of collapsed buildings, and the reconstruction of the collapsed buildings. The question of imprisoning Loya. Among them, the last question is the most important. Because the first two problems are brought by him. The ghost knows why. Obviously it is such a beautiful snow scene, who knows that it will freeze on people? Frozen as a scar. Because there was no observation hockey, countless soldiers could not detect the danger, and they were frozen directly before they could dodge. Although the freezing intensity was not as severe as it was during the confinement of Luo Yagwan, it would be a big problem if it was not treated as soon as possible. There are also those houses that cannot be avoided at all, covered by large snowflakes, and some of them are directly frozen. In this regard, Loya's explanation is that the freezing effect of these snowflakes is gradually strengthened over time, and to the extent of freezing and cracking the house, it basically needs to wait until the last wave. And after being frostbitten by the first wave of snowflakes, no one would continue to stay outside foolishly, so there was no news of anyone being frozen to death. After listening to Loya's explanation, the witnesses, who were in the audience all looked horrified. That is to say, if we continued to stay outside at that time, the end would be the same as those buildings, which were directly frozen and cracked. Can you please stop making such an outrageous joke in the headquarters? Boom. But when they were deeply grateful, someone took revenge for them. The naval headquarters, the marshal's office. You bastard. He only heard Sengoku shout, suddenly turned into a black line, jumped from the upper seat in a swooping posture, and then punched Loya in the face, knocking his whole body and spinning him upside down. Go out. There is nothing to say about Loya's punishment, and he will be taken back to prison immediately, and the confinement time will be extended to half a year. Originally, Sengoku wanted to cut off Loya's military rank. After all, the two incidents of escaping from prison and creating large-scale turmoil in the headquarters were indeed too sinful. Possible. However, considering the particularity of Loya, Sengoku finally gave up this seemingly attractive idea. Loya must stay in the position of lieutenant general, which will benefit their future plans without any harm. Then, this problem is solved. The next question is, how should Loya be imprisoned? Garp found Sengoku at the same time as the incident, and swore with the room full of donuts and senbei that he really handcuffed the Heilu stone lock in Loya's hands. And as a veteran powerhouse, he is also very sure that Loya did not use any strange tricks to keep Heilushi from touching his skin. Since Garp is so certain, in other words, Loya turned out to be a devil fruit person who was not restrained by Heilushi. Thinking of this possibility, Sengoku backed away, summoned a group of bigwigs, stared solemnly at the handcuffed Loya, and asked, Loya, are you a devil fruit person? Among them, in addition to Garp's desire to prove that he did not collude with Loya, it was Kuzan who was most concerned about this issue. There will never be two identical devil fruits in this world at the same time. This is a well-known thing in the sea, and there is no need to go to research. Therefore, in the eyes of Kuzan, Loya has always been the person who has the ability of the ice dragon fruit. But now the situation is a little more complicated. As a devil fruit person, he is not restrained by Halushi. What an international joke. This is simply not One Piece. Facing the scrutiny eyes of the bigwigs, Loya knew that he could not deceive people by continuing to pretend to be weak. So, in the shocked eyes of Sengoku and others, Loya stood up from the floor calmly, then controlled the magic power to form ice, got into the keychain of the handcuffs, and directly removed the Halu stone lock. Boom! The Halu stone lock was knocked to the ground, making a dull sound, as if beating on the hearts of Sengoku and others at this moment. Loya, you, looking at the handcuffs on the ground, Kuzan opened his mouth, but was speechless. Just now, that was indeed the fruit ability, right? That is to say. As you can see, Loya spread out his hands, and the endless cold air condensed and circled behind him, forming ice belts as thin as cicada wings. Afterwards, the ice belts were intertwined and woven continuously, and soon, an ice-made reclining chair appeared under Loya's butt. He stepped back comfortably, kicked the lock with his toes high, caught it, and played with it in his hand. I'm not restrained by fresh water, sea water or even sea towers. For me, these things have no meaning. I'm just an ordinary person, and it's okay to go swimming in the sea. Then what's the matter with the ability you are using now? Sengoku frowned and asked the question that everyone was most concerned about. Indeed, this is the question now. The relationship between Halushi and Devil Fruit abilities is mutual. Those who are restrained by Halushi must be Devil Fruit ability users, and Devil Fruit ability users must be restrained by Halushi. This is already the truth. However, now there is a guy who is a Devil Fruit person, but he is not restrained by Halushi. Apart from destroying the three views, Sengoku could not find any new adjectives. But he is more willing to believe that Loya's power is in existence from the rest of the power system. For Sengoku's question, Loya smiled freely. I know the situation is complicated, but I still have to say, no, I am really a devil fruit person. At this point, as long as Marshal Sengoku and the rest of you are willing, I can eat another devil fruit to die. Loya will not admit that he is not a devil fruit power user, because he knows that there are people in this world who are cracking the mystery of devil fruit. Because he knows that he is still weak. Just like the group of Navy bosses in front of him, except for the soft persimmon of Zephyr who is not here, he can't move the rest of the people. Not to mention the four emperors, the silenced army and the unknown world government. Once his identity as a mage is exposed, what awaits him must not be a happy ending. After all, he has already reached the stage of the world, standing under the spotlight, and is no longer the boy who lives alone on the deserted island. If it is the latter, then he can still be the same as the protagonist of fantasy. He can carry a lot of treasures, overcome difficulties, and upgrade the small map to a large map. When the villain finally realizes that he is a big threat, it is too late to start. But not now, others are already at the location of the villain's final boss. Just like the beginning of the fantasy, the place where it appeared was not a small mountain village, but the Matsuri altar, the headquarters of the magic religion. It also happened to meet people's annual meeting. Chapter 240 Fatal Weakness. If Loya appeared in those remote and quiet places in East China Sea Windmill Town, he might have admitted his identity generously, and then practiced all the way, subdued his younger brother, and slowly upgraded by fighting monsters. Even if a strong man peeped at his power to hunt him down, it was just a fantasy standard routine that he would only meet after a long time when he became famous. However, life is not so much if, as soon as he appeared, he met the flying squirrel, which also made him firm in his determination to become a navy. In the world of One Piece, there are really not many silly white sweets like Straw Hats. It is Yuhi who issued this standard decent template, and his subordinates are also a group of fierce pirates, and the fat-looking Reikulu is also a ruthless character who will give the enemy a headshot once he starts. It's just that they will divide the target, not as crazy as the other pirates. So now, he is a navy, and at the same time, he will not admit that he is not a devil fruit person. Of course, Sengoku would not agree to Loya's proposal. Regardless of whether he agrees or not, if he really uses this method to test Loya, Zephyr, who is recuperating and preparing to install a shredder, will definitely look for him desperately. And now someone else is standing up. This is a person that was beyond the expectations of Loya and the rest of the bigwigs, and even said that before he stood up, everyone thought it was a good thing that he didn't fall into the trap, let alone talk to Loya. Looking at the Yuhi-colored figure who took a step forward and attracted everyone's attention, Loya narrowed his eyes slightly and murmured, "Akainu, Sakazuki." The person who stood up was one of the 3 naval admirals, Admiral Akainu. He first gave Loya a deep look, and then said to Sengoku, "Although this kid's behavior is not a soldier's morality, his behavior so far has not caused much damage to the Navy." He even said that because of with his presence, the big pirates have become more afraid of the Navy. So, regardless of whether Loya is a devil fruit person or not, we should accept him. After all, a black cat is a white cat, and the one who can catch the mouse is the good cat. Right, because so far, his attitude and methods towards pirates are obvious to all. Heathful, Crispia, Ho-Ho, what a terrible newcomer. Kazuna, Pulsolino. Loya slowly repeated the name, then raised his head and looked at Kuzan expectantly. However, Kuzan pretended not to see and said to Sengoku, "As Loya's nominal teacher, I am also willing to believe him." Kuzan-san. Loya was so touched that he was about to jump up and hug his thighs. Then, "But even if he is with us now, shouldn't we be thinking about how to imprison him?" "Loya, I have an MMP saying I don't know if it should be said or not. It seems that it is so. They gathered here because they should think about how to imprison this Loya, who is not afraid of sea towers." Sengoku touched the back of the goat beside him, thinking blankly. Then, in Loya's stunned eyes, Kuzan sneered, "Have you forgotten that this kid has a fatal weakness? So it is very simple to imprison him, you only need to design a mechanism." "Loya, I have an MMP that must be said now. It's going to kill people." Roha Kiba roared angrily, stabbing Kuzan with a stab of salted fish. Then, boom, boom. Kuzan's flying knee kicked Loya away, and then he slammed his fists on the ground with both hands. Looking at Loya who directly smashed the floor and fell below, Kuzan clapped the dust on his hands that didn't exist, and said lightly, "So, it's actually very simple to imprison Loya. It's not that troublesome at all, just threaten him. You mean it, Loya?" "Yes. Will you escape from jail this time when you are locked up?" "No. That's settled." Kuzan showed a satisfied smile, then stretched out a lot, and silently took out the blindfold and put it on his head. "Then, if there is nothing else, I'll go back to sleep first. Guys, I'll say goodbye first." Looking at Kuzan who walked out all the way, the rest of the people murmured. "In other words, we really don't understand the operation of your master and apprentice. Seems to be aware of the doubts of the others, watching the whole process." Show. Lieutenant General Crane coughed lightly, attracting everyone's attention. "Loya's seasickness. No, the symptoms of vehicle sickness will become more and more serious as his strength becomes stronger. You should all know his current strength, and he doesn't need the old woman's nonsense. So if he is now imprisoned in the vehicle, come on, in less than a day, he'll probably be dead." "Oh, so it is." After listening to Lieutenant General E's explanation, everyone suddenly realized. Then Carp looked at Sengoku oddly and asked, "What the hell are you following? Oh, aren't you the marshal? Don't you know?" "I see everyone is. Oh, just follow the, oh." Sengoku shrugged, his tone relaxed. "Yes, as a guy with such an obvious weakness, even if there is a real problem, it is not a matter of minutes to take care of him with their strength." At this time, General Crane continued to add, "However, as the strength becomes stronger, Loya's flight time will definitely become longer and longer. At that time, he will be able to move on the sea without any tools. Not to mention, he doesn't get dizzy when he rides on the animal's back." just dazzling all artificial means of transport. Humph. Akainu said with a stern face, as a navy, this weakness is a shame. We are not only the navy, but also the generals. As a result, we are afraid of the sea. Kizaru stabbed Akainu savagely, then turned into a light before the red dog broke out, and escaped through the window. Looking at Akainu, whose face was black as if he had turned on his armed color, Sengoku rubbed his temples with a headache and announced the end of the meeting. Okay, then let's do it. What are you going to do? Sengoku grabbed Garp beside him and said viciously, can you make your noise when you eat senbei a little louder, bastard? I can't bear it. You are long. Well, being a human being, the most important thing is to be happy. Garp held his booger without any seriousness. Such a close distance made Sengoku disgusting enough. Come and eat a slice of senbei and calm down. I'll eat you, asshole. That day, the Navy in the headquarters saw their Marshal Sengoku turned into a huge Buddha statue, burst through the office on the top floor of the fortress, and slapped the naval hero Garp in the air.